If you've listened to my other stories that I've shared here recently, then you know that I mentioned about growing up in the woods in a secluded area, and that the house and the property that we live on was a hotbed for paranormal activity and strange occurrences. I honestly believe that the land was cursed by Native Americans hundreds of years ago. Anyway, we always had a ton of pets and even had a small personal farm with all sorts of animals. For some reason though, we had terrible luck keeping anything alive. Our pets would die in the strangest of accidents and gruesome ways too. Nothing would ever live long and we just constantly dealt with death. So obviously, with so many deaths, we began to grow quite a large pet cemetery in our backyard. What was strange and unexplainable though was what happened after we buried them. So I remember going to visit the grave of a recently buried pet and noticing that it was dug up and its head was missing. This happened every time too, and we genuinely all thought that it was a fox or some sort of other wild animal. This would go on for years and left us completely confused and honestly quite creeped out too. One day though, our dog, who was very old at this point and on his way out, he was put down at the vet's and we brought him home to bury him. We wrapped him in a white blanket and had to dig a very big hole because he was a huge dog, about 6 feet in length and also weighed a lot too. But 2 days later, after we buried him, my sister and I made our way back to visit our dog's grave, and as we approached, I noticed that something was off. You see, there was a pile of dug up dirt and there was some white sheet exposed from the ground. Something had dug up our dog and it dug where the head was located and took it from the body while leaving the body still buried and untouched. This immediately scared me half to death because I now knew that this was not a fox or some other wild animal because there was nothing to be able to take that head considering the size of my dog's head. It's just completely not possible. This now left us all creeped out and wondering what could possibly be doing this, and why it was doing this too. Also, I should probably mention too, because the horrible luck that we had with the animals, we really began to think that there was something wrong with us, and couldn't understand how this constantly happens, and what we were doing wrong. Well, after finally moving from there years and years later, we had, well, 0 issues and we had no pets dying, and managed to have them to all live out to old age. And so we realized that it was not us, but something seriously wrong with that property that was impacting the animals. Might I mention too that it wasn't just animals either. Unfortunately, my baby brother also died on that property too. Another incident happened in the middle of the night when a priest was driving down the highway when he suddenly struck the telephone pole next to our mailbox, and his car drove up the pole, shooting it up into the air, which he was then ejected out of the windshield and died in our front yard. I remember finding his Bible the next day in the grass, which was, well, kind of creepy, I guess. We also almost didn't make it either when one cold January night, while my dad was away in another state working, my siblings and I, along with my mum, all huddled up in the living room near the wood-burning stove, keeping warm while we camped out with our pillows and blankets watching a movie. I, who was sleeping, suddenly awoke from my sleep and said calmly, "The house is on fire." This startled my mum, which prompted her to investigate, and it was in fact on fire. We all managed to run out with just the clothes on our back, but the house, which was 300 years old and made out of cedar, went up like a match and literally burned to the ground, leaving not even a beam behind. If I had not awoken up to say what I did at that point in time, well, we would have most likely been killed from the fire, especially with just how quickly it all lit up. This land has a history of tragedy, and even in current day, it continues to harvest more negative energy by destroying everything that steps foot onto it, causing more torment and more pain. It's been 19 years since I moved away, and I still to this day constantly dream of the property, multiple times a month in fact, and my siblings and mother do as well, and quite honestly, it's like we cannot escape it. My family and I lived in my childhood home for 15 years before moving into an older house just down the road. We only stayed there for a few months since we were just renting, but shortly after settling in, I began to feel an unsettling presence, as if I was constantly being watched. It filled me with fear and unease, and I developed severe insomnia during this time because of it. The house itself felt very heavy with tension, as my family was going through a pretty turbulent period. The bathroom was upstairs, positioned so that the shadow of anyone standing in front of the mirror would appear on the door. And one night, my dad told me that after finishing a movie, he went upstairs to use the bathroom, and halfway up the stairs, he noticed a shadow on the bathroom door. It appeared to be brushing its hair, and he assumed it was me getting ready for school extra early. He called out my name, and the shadow paused, almost as if acknowledging him, before continuing the hairbrushing motion. When he opened the bathroom door, though, nobody was there. He checked the shower and the storage closets, thinking that I might be playing a prank, but I can assure you I wasn't. He finally went to my room and found me asleep, and this scared my dad enough that he hurried back downstairs and told me that he wouldn't go upstairs again that night. This wasn't the only unsettling experience that we had in that house, though, because one morning when my brother and I were still in school, it was my responsibility to make sure that he got up on time to get ready and catch the bus. And that morning, I was downstairs on the family computer, completely absorbed and unaware of how much time had passed. And when I finally checked the clock, I panicked and I bolted upstairs, fully expecting to find my brother still asleep, but to my surprise, he was already awake, sitting up in bed. My first thought was relief. Thank God he's up, quickly followed by confusion. How did he wake up? I asked him, "How did you get up on your own today?" He looked at me confused and said, "What? You woke me up." I froze. "What do you mean I woke you up? Was I being too loud?" He replied, "No, you came into my room, turned on the light and said, 'Hey, it's time to get up,' and then you left." But it wasn't me. I had been downstairs the entire time. I'm sure of it. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened. It never happened before or since then, and I'd love to know what you guys make of this, because I really think that there was something in that house imitating me. Not just because of what I've just shared with you guys, but also the physical and emotional effects that I experienced during this time. I just cannot ignore them. This happened when I was in college. It was a period in my life where just a lot of creepy stuff happened to me. I don't really know what I was doing to attract so many weirdos at that time in my life, but I probably should have been evaluating my life choices a little more closely. Anyway, during college, I worked as a tutor at school, but on the weekends, I would sometimes babysit for family friends. One of the kids was actually old enough so that he didn't need a babysitter. His name was Chris, but he wasn't old enough to watch the younger kids yet, whose name was Kevin. Thus, my presence on the night that would prove to be, honestly, just terrifying. So, I was babysitting for this family one Saturday night. The parents didn't usually stay out too late, getting home at like 10 p.m. or earlier even, most nights anyway when I babysat, for their monthly date night. But this particular night was a special situation. I cannot remember the circumstances of it now, but I was 19. I could stay out past 10 p.m. They figured that they'd be home by at least 1 a.m., and they said that I was welcome to spend the night, but I'd already decided that that would not be happening. That house, honestly, had a super weird vibe to it. It was kind of isolated, and they had all these old buildings on the property too. A silo, some sheds, a gigantic barn, etc. Maybe I've watched too many horror movies, but all I could think was that there were just so many places for people to hide in those buildings. Plus, the house was really old too, and those always freak me out because, well, ghosts and all that. So I was not going to be spending the night, in other words. That much was clear. Now, as I was babysitting the kids, and Kevin wanted me to go help him find something in the basement, he had all of these costumes he used to dress up in. Once, he scared the absolute life out of me when he came up behind me in the dark, wearing an ultra-realistic soldier costume, carrying a replica musket that I could have sworn was real, but turned out wasn't. I nearly lost a part of my soul that night. But the basement was the second creepiest part of the house. The creepiest was definitely the attic, obviously, because attics are terrifying as good as they are. So if he would have asked me to go up there, it would have been a hard no. It wasn't fully finished, and it was really big with lots of corners and turns and hallways and stuff with a bunch of different rooms. It was actually my first time going beyond the stairway, and I kept thinking that if I had been aware of just how scary this basement was, there was no way in heck that I'd be babysitting in this house. But I, of course, didn't want to look like a wimp in front of the kids, so I went with Kevin to his costume area, which was kind of deep in the basement, because, well, of course it is. As we were looking for the costume, well, Kevin was looking, I was questioning my life choices that had led me to that moment. We heard weird noises that can only be described as footsteps, like upstairs. At first, I just said that it must be Chris, but then Chris was just suddenly in the doorway, scaring the heck out of me. I had no idea where the heck he had come from, and he was like, "Hey, that's not me." I remember this moment vividly. The three of us standing near this closet filled with various costumes of various creepiness in this tiny room, in a super sketchy basement, listening to what we thought were footsteps upstairs. Well, this is how it's all gonna happen. This is how we die, I thought, weirdly kind of immediately at peace with it. But that only lasted a second before I thought, man, to heck with this, and I looked around for a weapon. This is where watching too many horror movies actually came in handy, I suppose. Of course, there really wasn't much around because I was in a child's playroom, and the rest of the basement had little within it, apart from like a washer and a dryer, which would make a pretty poor weapon, unless I could somehow push it onto someone, which seemed unlikely to happen in this particular situation. So in the end, I settled on this random crowbar that I found. Really, it was just lying on the floor and neither kid knew why. I cannot express how creepy this basement was, and anyway, I prepared to meet our fate while considering just how much of a risk I was willing to take to keep these kids safe. It was at this moment that I realized something too. The dog wasn't barking. The family had this golden retriever named Lily who would bark at, well, pretty much everything. And she was not barking. So I rationalized that the sounds were just noises of the old house and that was normal. Plus, I realized when we heard the noises too that we weren't actually under the house itself based on the layout of the basement. We were sort of under a porch. So even if there was someone, it wasn't anyone in the actual house. It could have been, well, anyone really, a delivery driver being the most likely explanation. I felt a lot better about that after I thought about it, but you can bet your butt that I kept that crowbar right next to my side. Again, I say horror movies. They seriously prepared me for this type of situation, I think. So, the kids and I went upstairs, where we found Lily knocked out. Not like where someone knocked her out, she was just sort of zonked. Like she just jolted awake when I touched her because she'd been sleeping that soundly. I actually thought that she was dead at first because that was the way the night seemed to be going. Once upstairs though, I went to the porch and very cautiously opened the door to look for a possible package. It was winter, so it got dark early, meaning that it was feasible that a delivery driver would still be working after the sun went down, but naturally there was no package. I mean, of course there wasn't, right? I wouldn't be sharing this if this is how the story ended, but anyway. By this point, I was really stressed out, but the kids were pretty much over it. While they were playing video games, I was Googling the crime rates in this town, and all of a sudden Lily perked up and started barking like a maniac, and a second later I heard a knock on the door. Honestly, I just felt like I could not catch a break this night. So, with my crowbar in hand, I walked to the door, and I could see through the frosted window in the door that someone was indeed standing there. I couldn't make out their features, but somebody was definitely there. Since I'm not the brightest of all bulbs, I didn't open the door, but I did ask through the doorway who it was. The man on the other side of the door said that they had a pizza delivery. You probably already know what I'm about to say, but we didn't order pizza. This was before every kid had a cell phone, so the boys couldn't have ordered one either. Plus, they had been totally dead to the world while they played video games anyway. And if the parents had ordered pizza, they definitely would have told me. So naturally, I again was prepared to fight for my life. I gripped the crowbar and I told the guy that we hadn't ordered a pizza. I thought for sure that he was going to insist and try to get me to open the door and all that. But surprisingly, he didn't. He just said, "Oh, sorry, my mistake," and he turned and left. At this point, I had a lot of questions, as one would when facing a series of unusual events in a creepy house in the middle of nowhere. So as I saw the guy walk off the porch through the frosted window, I opened the door just slightly to catch a glimpse. I wanted to see this guy, in case I needed to identify him out of a lineup or something eventually, but by the time that I opened the door, he was walking away, so really I only saw his back. But I did immediately notice two strange things. One, I didn't see a pizza in his hands, and two, I didn't see a car anywhere. The latter I could rationalize because, well, he might have parked on the street somewhere, which would have been strange since they had a large horseshoe-shaped driveway, but, it's possible, I suppose. But there was no pizza. I guess it technically might have just been blocked from view, but I doubt that really. I almost called him out on this too in a burst of ill-timed bravery, but then I realized that if I did, he would know that the jig was up and would have nothing to lose. So I just closed the locked door and hoped for the best. Later that night, Lily was again knocked out and the kids were upstairs in bed. I didn't think that I was going to fall asleep that night. I honestly was just sitting there with the crowbar in my hands on high alert, like I was about to be in a fight for my life. In hindsight, I suppose maybe it was a bit of an overreaction at this stage, but I wasn't going to be one of those idiots who dies because they underestimated a threat level. I mean, I might as well have suggested the kids and I split up, which, of course, I realized in that moment that was essentially what had happened. They wouldn't have been much help to me anyway, to be honest. Well, actually, Chris might have been because he was 14, as tall as I was, and could break a board with his fist. Maybe I should have kept him around, but anyway, eventually I did fall asleep for like half an hour, and I was awoken to the sound of an owl. I'm a really light sleeper, so either the owl hooting woke me up or else it was just a coincidence. But I heard the owl when I woke up, absolutely heard it. Only it didn't sound quite right. It sounded almost like an owl, I suppose, but something was off about it. As I look back on this now, what I did next was extraordinarily foolish, given the events that had already transpired that night. But I think my tired brain just wasn't working fast enough, and that's the real killer in horror movies. Exhaustion. In my fatigued state, I decided to investigate. I went to the door and I listened. The owl was still hooting, but it still sounded so weird. I couldn't figure out why it sounded so off. And then, this is when I did another stupid thing. I opened the door. With the door open, I could hear the owl a little bit better now, and I looked into the darkness, shining the light on my phone around. Given that this was early 2007, the light left a lot to be desired, but suddenly I heard the owl again. And honestly, I gasped because this is when it all came together. The hooting didn't sound like an actual owl. It sounded like someone, a human, imitating an owl. For real, even recalling it now with this story is giving me literal chills. Maybe it doesn't sound like a lot, but it was one of the truly terrifying experiences in my life. The moment where I realized all of this, my heart was about to jump out of my chest, and I still had the beam of light from my phone pointed into the darkness. And that was when I saw it reflected off of a set of eyes that were at the level of humans. Remember too that this was 2007, so that light was pretty terrible, which means the owner of said eyes was uncomfortably close. Though it was really dark outside, I couldn't make out anyone. I certainly was no longer tired, so I came to my senses, locked that door quickly, barricaded it with a chair, and retreated into the living room after checking all of the downstairs windows again. I also grabbed a big knife from the kitchen, like a Michael Myers style knife, because at this point, I legitimately thought that I might need it. I really contemplated calling the police, but what was I going to tell them? That something outside was making owl noises and had eyes? They'd be like, "That's an owl, you idiot," and then just probably hang up on me. So I just sat on the couch again, this time clutching the knife and the crowbar along with it. I tried not to think about all the horror stories that I'd read or seen, especially the ones involving well-meaning babysitters meeting gruesome ends, but unfortunately I just was not successful. And I did not fall asleep again that night. Now, around midnight, the couple came home. I had texted them to kind of warn them without sounding like I had completely lost my shred of cool that I had left, which would have been an accurate way to read my text, I suppose. I just said that I thought that I had heard someone outside, so be careful when they got home. They were seemingly totally unbothered though, because they lived in some bizarro world where bad things just didn't ever happen to good people. They walked in nonchalantly while I put the knife away before they saw me clinging to it like a shipwreck victim clings to any piece of floating debris that they can find. And this is when they told me that they thought that they had heard someone outside a few nights ago because, of course, this wasn't something you would tell your babysitter beforehand. Why would I need to know that, right? So I took my very well-earned money, ran to my car, and I just got out of there. Once I got home, it was then that I realized that I still had that crowbar, and I'm not gonna lie, I never brought it back. Because of their critical omission of information, I lived what was very nearly an actual nightmare, so I reasoned to myself that I had earned that crowbar by doing that. This was definitely the end of my babysitting career, though. Only one other time did I ever babysit for them, and that was during a legit medical emergency one of the parents was having. Everything turned out fine in the end, luckily, but I just couldn't turn them down when they called me in such desperation. And nothing weird happened that night, thank the Lord, because I don't think that I would have had the mental capacity to deal with that again. But even all these years later, I do know one thing with absolute certainty. That was not an owl. When I was a freshman in high school, Alyssa was my role model. Alyssa was a senior. She was so gorgeous, confident, smart, effortlessly stylish, and always owning the room. Back then I was way too shy to talk to her. Seniors are already pretty intimidating to freshmen, but Alyssa was next level intimidating because she was just such a queen. I didn't expect anyone to see me the way that I saw Alyssa, but I was pleasantly surprised in my senior year. You see, in my senior year, I started finding cute little notes in my locker. I wasn't expecting that at all, but I was really flattered, I must admit. The first one said, "You were beautiful in that dress on Friday." The handwriting was neat and simple with a cute little heart at the end. More notes kept coming too, always in the fourth period. I got a note every week or two, in fact. I know that they came during fourth period because I checked my locker before and after every class, but they were all really sweet and they said things like, "Your smile lights up the hallway," "You shine brighter than any star," "Your homecoming photos are straight out of a magazine cover, so stunning." There were more notes that I don't really remember, but they weren't exactly, well, romantic or flirty or anything. They looked sort of like things that I might have said to Alyssa if I would have spoken to her. I thought that maybe that they were from a shy underclassman girl. I had my suspicions. I didn't tell anyone about the notes. I really didn't want my friends turning this into an investigation and embarrassing whoever was leaving them. Whoever was leaving these messages, I genuinely thought that they just meant well. Then, in the second semester, my schedule changed. My last class of the day was upstairs, near my friend's locker. My friend's last class was near my locker, and so we swapped eventually, and I forgot about all these notes until my 18th birthday. That morning, my friend handed me a note that she had found in her, or my old, locker. It said, "Happy birthday, princess." At first, she thought that the notes were meant for her, since any of these compliments could have fit her too, but when she realized that the birthday didn't match up, she put two and two together. Come to think of it, I don't think any of the notes ever said my name, but I admitted that the notes had been happening all year and explained that I didn't want to make a big deal about it. Then my friends launched their investigation that I had been worried about. All of the girls in our friend group became detectives trying to solve this mystery. One friend, who didn't have a fourth period class, stationed herself by the lockers to surveil that area. And, you know what? It actually worked. But the notes, they weren't from a shy freshman or even from a boy at all. They were from a janitor, an older woman none of us knew. We all recognized her, but I don't think any of us had ever talked to her before. And she had been leaving these notes for several months now, watching me closely enough to comment on my outfits, field hockey games, and even what I posted on Facebook. I saw her at the last field hockey game of the season as well. She sat quietly in the stands, and that was the only time that I'd noticed her watching me, but I have no idea how many places I just didn't notice her watching me from. None of us brought this up to her, and I mean, she hadn't done anything wrong, I suppose, but the whole thing just felt unsettling in a way that is just really hard to explain. When I was younger, I would say about 7 to 9, I had a really strange paranormal experience that I fairly often think about, and have only been able to find one other person that had a similar experience my entire life. So one night after I had laid down to go to bed, I was still awake, and when all of a sudden everything around me started shaking or vibrating to an extreme extent. But when I say everything, I also mean my bed and myself were shaking and vibrating too. Then, after about 4 seconds of this shaking, I look out in front of me. I was laying on my left side and my bedroom was in my living room, so I was looking into the dining room or the kitchen area. And there was this shadow creature. He was completely two-dimensional and had the appearance of a typical demon, other than the fact that he was short, I guess. But he had short horns that stuck out from the side of his head that curved upwards, a round head, and I vaguely remember claws as well. While I see him, the shaking is still going on with the extremity that it started with, and the figure starts walking towards me. I say walking, but it wasn't smooth, uninterrupted steps like a person would take. The best way that I can describe it, it was like sort of glitch walking. It's like he would disappear and then reappear a few steps closer. Obviously, I was freaking out and crying and screaming, but the shaking didn't stop, and the figure didn't go away either. He got right up to my face, like if I wiggled a little bit closer to the edge of my bed, my nose would have been touching his. Once he got that close, I screamed for my mum, and then suddenly, the shaking stopped and the figure vanished right before my eyes. Hearing this, people may think that it was a dream, but I know for a fact that it wasn't, just because of how real it felt, and there was no transition from dreaming to waking up. It was all just one seamless experience. Also, immediately after the figure disappeared, I sprang up from my bed and sprinted to my mother's room. Anyway, has anyone else here had anything similar happen to them? I've been here for quite a while now, but I never just thought to share about all of this here. For some reference, I'm 19 now, so this would have been about 10 to 12 years ago, I think. In any case, if you've heard of a story like this or have been through something like this yourself, then I would love to hear from you. When I was around 13, I was listening to the Sunday Song Radio Countdown on KDWB. It usually lasted an hour, started at 8 p.m. and ended at 9 p.m., which then the nightly DJ house remix music would then play until about 12 in the morning. I was using this time to, just read some chapters of my assigned book for English class. This was before I had a cell phone, and it wasn't daylight savings time, so I was using the clocks on my stereo and my alarm clock, both set pretty accurately, consistently, so there was never any issues with the clocks that I was using being off time. I listened to the songs, which I cannot remember all of them, but I remember the number one song was Justin Timberlake's Rock Your Body. When the song finished, I put a bookmark on my page and I went to use the restroom, brush my teeth, before I changed for bed. I didn't turn off the radio as I liked the DJ stuff, so when I came back, I expected to hear house music. However, I didn't. Instead, it was Ryan Seacrest's voice starting off the countdown again. I was a bit confused, but shrugged, and when listening to radio last-minute replays weren't uncommon, but the time on the stereo caught my eye. 8 p.m. The time on my alarm clock read the same, and I listened to the first song, and it was the same number 10 that I had just listened to an hour ago. I went upstairs to look at the clocks, and the chance perhaps my clocks were wrong or something. But no, they read the same time. I was slightly freaked out by this, and to be honest, I still kind of am. I went to my father's office, asked what time he read on his wristwatch, and it was the same time. I then asked my dad if he saw the clocks doing anything weird, and he gave me a weird look and said no. I went back up to my room and re-listened to the entire countdown, and there was nothing different at all. I was also very much a nerdy, dorky, goody-two-shoes teen, so I wasn't under the influence of anything, nor took any substances at that age. I wasn't asleep, I was reading, so basically I was just reliving an hour of my life somehow. When 9 p.m. came around and the DJ music started playing, I went to my dad and tried to explain as best as I could what had just happened. My father was open-minded to these sorts of things and loved science that dealt with space and time, etc. He just chuckled and said that I probably wasn't paying attention to the time and was very engrossed within my book, and maybe thought that it was earlier than I thought that it was. But how would that explain the songs? You have to understand before streaming that if you loved music, you knew the schedule of the stations. At the time, they would only do replays during the weekdays, not on weekends. However, it was obvious that my dad didn't think that it was anything weird. It just felt like, when I left the bathroom and came back, that time sort of, reset. I think about this a lot, and I'm here because I'm wondering what you guys all think about this. It wasn't eventful, I guess you could say, nor did I feel any physical symptoms. I didn't have any major family events besides the typical toxic family dysfunction that we usually had as we grow up. I wish that I could remember more from that moment, but in any case, let me know what you guys think, because the whole thing has just really never sat with me very well. So Monday night, I went to sleep with my girlfriend in the house that we're currently renting. We're in a somewhat rural area, so we're not in much of a neighborhood, just off of a small road with a few houses around us really, the closest being about 300 feet away. When we're both startled awake, and we hear a very loud banging coming from our front door, very rapid and strong hits. At first, we both just sort of lie there and listen. After 30 seconds or so, I check the time and see that it's 4 in the morning. Okay, something's not right here. I get up and grab my pistol, then I hear a woman start screaming from the porch. She yells, "Open the door, I'm having a seizure. Mum, open the door." Well, she continues banging on our door with all the violence of someone trying to knock a door in. We're both extremely uncomfortable, so instead of answering, I call the police. I explain the situation and give my address to dispatch, who informs me that someone else has also complained and police are already en route. So, for like the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just frozen between my girlfriend still lying in bed and the window that we have on our front porch that the stranger out there could easily access. She continues beating our door violently and screaming every few seconds until the police finally arrive. They go and talk to her and then eventually approach my door and ask if she said anything of any use. I tell them what she had been saying, and then they go back to talking to her. My girlfriend comes out at this point, and we step out together to assess any damage to our front door. She immediately looks down and spots a pair of channel locks, similar to a pair of pliers for those unaware. And when we look at the door, there is a multitude of dents from where the woman outside had been beating our door with the channel locks. I hand the channel locks over to the police and have them come back to our front door to photograph the damage. Bear in mind that we actually have a metal front door and she has made significant dents all over that thing. Police finish talking to her, then come give us a case number. I ask why she was doing that, and all they tell me is that if what she says is true, she had a good reason to be panicked. I ask if she lives near, and they point at the immediate house next to ours and tell me that she just moved back in with her parents apparently. 5 hours later, I hear a knock at my front door. I go and answer, and it's the woman from last night. Pretty visible drug usage has dwindled her body down to a sickly figure. She says, "I'm sorry if I scared you guys last night. There was a lot going on." Before I can even reply, she says, "I can fix your door. How much do you think that it would cost to paint over it?" It's Wednesday now, and every time me and my girlfriend have left to get lunch or go to work or go shop or whatever, she's always standing halfway out of her front door, just sort of staring at us. I'm waiting on the case report to be finished on Monday so that we can hopefully get a protective order against her. This has obviously been a pretty stressful situation, and me and my girlfriend are having difficulty sleeping ever since then. I really hope it doesn't escalate from here, because that night was genuinely pretty terrifying. I'm really not big into the paranormal or spiritual world, but whenever I'm in doubt, I think about my old apartment, because I have never experienced anything like it before or after. Me and my family lived on the second floor, another family downstairs, and the first week that we moved in, we started experiencing some weird stuff. Our belongings ended up in spots that we wouldn't even think to leave them. utilities turning on and off by themselves, animals suddenly misbehaving. The biggest thing though was me and my mum's nightmares, usually of us being chased in the woods by some creature screaming bloody murder. That got to the point too where we both had trouble sleeping, and she would sleep in my bed or I would sleep in hers. My mum thought that she was going into psychosis and that it was rubbing off on me or something, until she talked to our downstairs neighbors. They had moved in a bit before we did, and they were apparently experiencing similar things. That in and itself is a bit of a long story, but after about a month of living there, I decided to sleep by myself one night. Of course, I started having a nightmare, freaky, demonic little thing trying to pull a blanket off of me. I was completely frozen, and the second that I wake up, the sheets suddenly fly off of my bed. No one really believes me except for my mum, but I've been told that I must have kicked them off in my sleep or something, a walking state. But considering basic physics, covers do not elegantly soar away from a bed like that without someone else whisking it off. I get up and I swear that I see the blanket still moving too. I'm completely awake at this point and run to my mum's room, who had just woken up from a similar nightmare. And is that not really weird and sort of insane? The only difference was that in her nightmare, she woke up in the woods at night with nothing but a blanket. There is obviously a lot in between this, but long story short, that was definitely our last straw. We moved into another apartment, and absolutely nothing out of the ordinary took place. And I mean, how do you even explain that? Usually I refrain from telling this story because I know how crazy it sounds, but I just couldn't help but share it here, and I would love for all of you guys to let me know what you think about all of this. Was there really some sort of paranormal activity going on, or was it all just in our heads? So I'm generally a very skeptical person about the paranormal and things related. This is the first and only weird stuff that I've ever experienced, and I wanted to see if anyone else had had anything similar or remotely similar take place to them. This happened in Katy, Texas. So I used to work in the Katy Mills Mall as a stock teammate in an athletic brand store. That means that my shift started at 4 a.m. and would go until 11 a.m. when the store opens for the public. I was on Interstate 10, Frontage Road, driving to work at around 4:10. I was late that day, and right past the Memorial Hermann Hospital, I saw the weirdest and spookiest thing that I had ever seen. On the side of the road, there was this person, completely in white. I couldn't see his face, couldn't see his hands or feet, all covered in what looked like a white elastic cloth or something like that. The thing was kind of limping at first, but then it started walking on all fours like a dog, and then on twos again. At that moment I thought that it was pretty weird, but the moment that I was really spooked was when I tried to look back through the mirrors, and turning my head, the thing was not there anymore. It had vanished in like a split second. Like I said, this was very early in the morning, so there were not a lot of cars around and certainly not a lot of people walking on the side of the road. I used to drive there every single day, and I've never seen anyone or anything out there at those hours. I'm not telling this story to convince anyone. I just want to know if anyone has experienced a similar thing like this, and maybe your thoughts about it. Have you got any idea on what the heck this was? I'm going to talk about something that happened to me about 2 months ago. I was visiting my great-grandmother with my grandma, my great-aunt, and my big brother. We were having a crab dinner that night, something we all wanted to do for many years, but couldn't because it's expensive as heck here. But anyway, my brother and I were messing around in the basement where a room that we call the duck room is. The duck room has history, obviously. Everyone who has been in there, friends, family, strangers, have always been a bit put off by it. As kids, my siblings and cousins refused to step foot in there. The feeling has been discussed with many as dread or sadness and hostile at times. I personally have never believed in the paranormal, until later in this story, but something about this room was just so raw and almost living. 3 people had died in that same room, 2 family members in the same bed, and the previous owner even. Anyway, with that aside, this is what happened. So my brother and I wanted to send videos to our online friend group inside the room. We've talked about it for hours and they were curious. Of course, him and I started goofing around and unfortunately it was a little bit disrespectful. We were pretending to be ghosts in a sort of joking manner. And well, skip to later, him and I go back in there and start talking away. Not about how creepy the room is or anything, but just chatting and feeling the weird feelings like we always do. I begin to look through the videos because one was pretty funny and I noticed something strange. These dust-like particles are sort of flying around everywhere. We decide to check every other room, camera flash on, lights off. None of the other rooms had this, despite many of them never being cleaned out or having foot traffic even. I go back in the duck room to refilm, when suddenly every hair on my body just stands up. I feel highly uncomfortable and sort of scared, which is weird. I don't really get scared in this room, just uncomfortable. In any case, I run out and drag my brother in. I walk around the bed and pause. I stood there for a second feeling more and more unsettled, when suddenly I feel fingers, genuine fingers, grab around the back of my head and yank me by the roots of my hair. My brother was on the complete opposite side of the room and asks, "What the heck was that?" I, of course, bolt out of there like I'm in the Olympics and begin to suddenly freak out. I told my brother what happened, and he confirmed it. He's not a liar, nor would he joke about me being touched or hurt in any way like this, and he said that he watched my head get pulled back and how I was very, very pale. I haven't stepped foot in that same room again since then, and I refuse to. After this encounter, I now believe in the paranormal. It's something that I've tried to believe in for many years, but up until this point, I just have had no evidence. But now, after this, I am definitely convinced. As a young mother, I could never afford much. But there were these low rental units just off of 22nd Street. The owner of this building was basically a bit of a slumlord. I've got to give him some credit though, because he did attempt to renovate and he evicted all of the problematic tenants that used to live there. The building manager was being more picky about who they let into the building now too, so that was why the apartment building was half empty when I moved in there with my 3-year-old. We got to know the neighbors pretty quickly. I met a woman named Rebecca. She told me that her previous boyfriend died from heart complications not too long ago. Then she told me how his friend Jim was there for her and how they leaned on each other during their time of mourning. She said that she moved out of her place to live with Jim in his basement suite. She wasn't much older than I was, pretty with dark curly hair and pale skin. I nodded my head and commiserated with her. It was good that we had each other, to be honest. Grief was hard enough on our own, and if you can find a shoulder to lean on, then it was that much lighter. They offered me a beer, but I declined, and that was Rebecca. Now one day, I was curled up on my couch watching TV alone one night. It was well after midnight when somebody knocked on my door. My immediate thought was, who the heck would be knocking on my door at this hour? My nosy self headed over to look into the peephole, and standing there in the hallway, under the fluorescent light, was this older gentleman. He was wearing a short-sleeved colourful print shirt, khaki shorts and brown sandals. He was a white guy with silver, messy, medium-length hair, and he had a bit of a paunch. I opened the door. He looked at me with these sad blue eyes, and he asked, "Is Rebecca home?" I furrowed my brow and then told him that she didn't live in this unit anymore. I told him that she moved into Unit 3 downstairs. The expression on his face after I said that, it was a mix of surprise, disappointment, and something else too. He quickly looked at his feet. I went to close the door, but he looked up at me and then he said that he was thirsty. He asked me if I could please give him a glass of water. I was a bit taken aback by that because that was a bit of a strange request. Ever the helpful person though, I said, "Sure, but stay here." I shut the door, locked it, and then headed to the kitchen. I ran the cold tap water into a mug. Then I unlocked the door. I opened it and I was handing him the water, and I got this strong gut feeling to just not touch his skin. I carefully avoided his fingers. He took a few sips and then he handed the mug back. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt alarmed, in danger almost. I didn't let his hand touch mine, and then I closed the door quickly. My heart sped up a bit. The hallway was chilly and my fingertips felt cold. I peeked into the peephole and there was no one there. I was uncomfortable the rest of the night. Like, why did I tell him where Rebecca lived? I shouldn't have done that. I felt like I did something really wrong by doing this, and it was as if I had just given permission of some kind, or I had just allowed something to happen maybe. Honestly, I don't remember if these things happened before or after that night, but the lights would burn out, especially the dining room light. It was frequent enough that I asked management to check the electrical, and they said everything was good and there was nothing broken or loose in the wiring. I ended up just leaving the dining room dark in the end. My boyfriend was over one evening and the three of us were watching TV together in the living room. My boyfriend got up to make himself a sandwich. There was an old wooden sort of room divider between the two rooms, and we could see him at the counter fixing his snack. We had our own on the coffee table. My boyfriend had to walk around the divider through the dark, dingy room area to get into the kitchen. My 3-year-old said, "Mummy, why is that man staring at us?" I asked, "What man? Where is he?" My 3-year-old pointed to the dark dining room area, and I looked, but of course there was no one there. I was really creeped out, but I asked, "What does he look like?" "He has big fat eyes and his hair is like this." Then my child showed me with their little hands how the man's hair stuck out, then made wavy fingers. I didn't want to scare my baby, so I pretended what they had said didn't frighten me. My boyfriend, on the other hand, was still in the kitchen, and he paused mid-slice after he had heard that. Then my 3-year-old said, "He is your friend who shuts off the lights." At that, I shuddered. I wrapped my child up in the blankets and my boyfriend came over to join us. I stayed up that whole night, just watching over them. So I have a few stories to tell, and I'm kinda hoping that someone can debunk them, to be honest. Let's start off with the earliest story in my arsenal. So my grandfather, when he was in his 30s, circa 1940s Outback Australia, he was a roo shooter, a kangaroo hunter at that time, and was out in the middle of nowhere when his truck broke down. Now when you're shooting roos, you do this at night time, and he said that he saw a light off in the distance and followed it thinking that it was a house light. He did seem to think that it was strange as he was walking for a while and didn't seem to be getting any closer. Dawn was approaching, so he went back to his truck and he waited. No one came looking for him. The following night he said that it was very dark and it was about 10 p.m. and the light appeared again. This time it was a floating ball is how he described it, about 1 kilometer away. He followed it and the same thing happened. As he approached, it appeared to be keeping the same distance away, yet when he retreated, it followed. My granddad was pretty fearless because if that were me, I would have run off and cried, to be honest. But thankfully, he was found the next day. The second story was my father's, and he also was out roo shooting in his late teens, 1960s, with a friend. As they were driving off the property, they saw a really big kangaroo off to the side of the dirt road, single-car tracks. His friend stopped and took aim, but then behind them, another car pulled up. Dad told his friend that he should probably start driving as there was a car waiting. His friend said that it would only take a minute and then they could move the truck off the road to let them pass. As soon as he took the shot, the lights behind them suddenly disappeared though. They got out and looked where the car was, and there was no car there and also no other tracks. They even drove back a few kilometers looking for them, but there was nothing. Then, about a month later, he was driving to his parents' home about maybe an hour away from where he was living at that time. He was with his friend and his friend's girlfriend, and they took the back roads. This was at about 7 p.m., and in the distance, they saw a weird glowing UFO hovering about 30 meters over a river. Out of curiosity, they went closer, and he said that they got about 50 meters away from it. He said that it was pulsating, sort of like exploding out light and then sucking it all back in. Now, Dad's pretty fearless also, and he wanted to get out and go and explore. His friends, however, they weren't so keen, and so they noped right out of there at that point. He still wonders about it to this day, though. I found Dad's journal from his teen years, and I even read those stories, so I think that what he's telling me is the truth. But now, for the most recent one. So in my parents' home in outback Queensland, it's pretty common for everyone to see the silhouette of my grandmother getting around. I was playing hide and seek with my friend one night, and I could hear her saying that she had found me, and to stop ignoring her and help her find my brother. Obviously, it wasn't me, though. She said that this person was standing in front of the mirror in my room looking at herself, and it took her a bit to realize that it wasn't actually me. I was a pretty good hider at that time, and another time in the room on the front veranda, my brother, 16 at the time, said that he woke up to being pulled up by his arms. He got to the point where his butt was being lifted off when he felt whatever it was let go, and he instantly fell back to bed. He decided to just go back to sleep. He couldn't really care less, and I didn't believe him really until I was asleep on the couch in that same room. I was 4 months pregnant at the time with my second, and it was the only place that I could sleep comfortably. And I woke up to my arm being lifted off and up towards the roof. My arm fell back, and I decided that in the morning that I'd move back to the bedroom, but I was too tired to really care right then. Obviously, there are more stories, but I'll have to share them another day because there's a lot more. If anyone can explain anything about what I just shared, though, then please do, because when I rethink of these stories, I tend to be a little bit afraid to go outside at night, and I just really don't like that. I recently got a job at Walmart in online grocery, and while I don't talk to customers nearly as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and also direct people to items that they cannot find. There are plenty of stupid people who don't look before asking me where something is, and people who are just plain rude as well, but besides this one encounter, I haven't really had a problem, so to speak, with creepy men. At my past jobs, I was used to men making horrible comments about my body and body mods, but I guess at Walmart there's always someone weirder walking around, so I don't get as many now. It started at around noon when I went out on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle, struggling to fit a box pack of beer into my cart, when this guy came up and he helped me. He was probably in his, early to mid-20s. This kind of adds to the creep factor because I only recently turned 18 and haven't switched out of my yellow name tag yet. But he was a bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, wearing a Korn shirt. I thanked him for helping me and said I liked his shirt. He said that it was no problem and complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I pick up my handheld and get back to bagging soda and praying that I don't get sent any exceptions that night. Around 15 minutes later, I'm in the soup aisle, crouched on the floor bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment, I'll admit, but someone walks up behind me and says, "Excuse me." I'm already excited to talk to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, says "excuse me" when they want my attention. So I stand up and turn around to see the same guy. He says that he's been looking everywhere and he cannot find the baking soda, and that he knows that he's probably passed it, but he wants to make sure that he's looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few over, and what a coincidence. The next thing that I need for my run is bread flour. So I tell him that I'm heading over to the aisle the baking soda is in right now, and I'll show him where it is when we get there. He says thank you. I finish scanning the Dinty Moore and we head over. It was a Tuesday and completely dead at this stage, like I was seeing my co-workers more often than customers. But we get to the baking aisle and I show him the baking soda, before getting to picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to pick from in that aisle, so I was there for a good 10 minutes just picking different items, and I couldn't help but notice that he put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart and was just sort of standing there on his phone, occasionally sort of looking at me. It was a little strange, but maybe he's texting someone and is feeling a bit awkward that neither of us have left the aisle yet. Who knows? In any case, I finish my pick run, stage the totes into the cart, and bring it to the back. I go on 2 more runs before my first 15-minute break, and I catch a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figure he's having a hard time finding stuff because the Walmart that I work at is absolutely massive, and continue on with my day. I go into the break room to eat the salad that I had in the fridge and drink a cherry Pepsi while getting that good gossip from one of the guys from customer service. Life is good. For a second, I thought that I saw Corn Guy walk past the door though, but I figured that it was just an employee wearing the same shirt perhaps, and didn't think too much of it again until later. My manager tells me to do 3 more pick runs before I go to the back to start dispensing orders, and so I head out on a produce run. This is easily one of the worst types, as the produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy. In any case, I get to the produce section and start doing my thing when I see Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I sort of laugh to myself for a second before realizing that it's 1:30 at this point and this guy has been at the Walmart for at least an hour and a half now. There are only 3 things in his cart too. I try not to look in his direction so he doesn't try to talk to me again and get back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point, I'm getting some serious weirdo vibes from this guy, but he walks up to me and says hi. I say hi back and I ask him if he needs anything. And he proceeds to go on the creepiest tirade that, honestly, I think I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time while holding a bag of apples. What he said was, "I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight. If you're trying to impress that guy that you were talking to, you should go for someone who would love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You're so beautiful." I stare at this man in shock. For one, I eat my salads for lunch because I feel like salad, and it sure ain't a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits, you name it. Second of all, I have a boyfriend already. It's not Gavin from customer service, and he's also fat and could not care less what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that some random creep thinks that I, a grown woman, have been waiting all my life to be validated by him, a man who spends all day at Walmart without even being paid for it. Needless to say, I'm horrified, embarrassed because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who are giving us weird looks, and sort of ticked off by the audacity of this weirdo. Obviously, I cannot tell him any of this, at the risk of losing my job, but I stick with telling him that I think that that's inappropriate for him to say. He needs to stay out of employee-only areas like the break room, and if he needs anything else, he can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looks shocked, as if this wasn't the nicest way that I could have ended the conversation, and I end my pick run early to go talk to a manager. In the back, I tell my manager about Corn Guy, how he's been following me, and how I'm not going back out to pick tonight unless we know for sure that he's gone. She's understanding and lets me start dispensing early, and sends one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day goes, well, pretty okay really, except when my coworker and I go out together to take a huge order to one of the spots at the main parking lot, and the Corn Guy is sitting there on the bench out front. I prayed that he was waiting for someone to come and pick him up and refused to take out any more orders to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him, and with minimal trouble as well, and at 8 I go back to OGP, turn in my handheld and keycard, and say goodbye to everyone left. Now, I always park in the main lot right in front of the grocery section, and as I'm walking, it's just starting to get a little bit dark. It had been raining on and off the whole day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I'm unlocking my terrible old CRV, I see the Corn Guy approaching me. I'm genuinely a little bit scared of what he wants from me at this stage, but at this point I have my keys out, and the pepper spray on the chain is clearly visible, so I'm hoping that he isn't stupid enough to try anything. He walks up to me and starts trying to talk again. I shut him down, telling him that he has been following me all day, a reminder that he has been at Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point, and I am pretty uncomfortable talking to him. I'm off the clock now, and if he needs something regarding Walmart, he can go talk to customer service, and if he wants to talk to me personally, I'm not interested, and he needs to leave me alone. He then has the nerve to look offended, and then he says something that really tops his salad rant in terms of stupid stuff to say to random women. Okay, since you're going to be like that, I won't ask you out. You're ungrateful. I thought you were cool and could maybe understand me, but you're just like every other girl. I'm too morbidly curious, so I ask him what the heck that means. He says, I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big or who can appreciate Corn's artistry. I thought that maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other stupid Midwesterner in this terrible town. At the end of this little rant, he then digs into his pocket of his sweatpants and produces a little switchblade. This pitiful little thing couldn't skin a hamster, but still, it was a blade. To be honest, I'm somehow even more offended, I guess. I mean, first, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears, and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep-cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third of all, we live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. And fourth, he's not only threatening me with a knife for not living up to his manic pixie dream girl fantasy, but thinks I'm going to be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I'm so sick of this guy that I just get in my car, tell him to go and take a hike, slam the door, and I get out of there. Thankfully, I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so my guess is that it's probably only a matter of time. I have been a little bit on the lookout, but I try not to let it get to me. Still, if he was willing to bring a blade like that and threaten me, then who knows what this guy is capable of. When I was 14 to 15, I was living with my dad. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment that was upstairs. I wouldn't say that the apartment was a hotspot for paranormal activity per se, but shortly after we moved in, some strange things definitely started to happen. For some reason, my dad's room always gave me the creeps. Mind you, I'm not really someone who is scared of the dark at all. But whenever I'd walk by his room and he wasn't home and the door was open, it felt like someone was looking back at me through that darkness. I started to close his door when he wasn't home because the feeling of being watched from his room was just overwhelming. One day, I had walked home from school and I didn't see my dad's Jeep in the parking lot, so I figured that he was going to do some handiwork for someone or whatever. So I went inside and put down my backpack and walked straight to his room and shut the door. I settled down into my room when I heard heavy stomping sounds from my dad's room. My heart instantly stopped. My dad always wears these big steel-toe boots that are good for outdoor work or construction and carpentry, and it sounded exactly like his heavy steps. I stopped for a moment to listen and walked close to his door. When I realized that the light was on from the crack at the bottom of the door, I said, "Dad," just to make sure my dad wasn't actually home. I know that I didn't see his car outside though, and so I didn't see my dad taking a nap when I first went to close the door either. And plus that light was not on, and I don't know, maybe I was just losing my mind. But whatever the case, there was no reply. I kept hearing the heavy footsteps though. My second thought was that, did someone break in and hide in my dad's room? Instantly at that thought, I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife as I kept hearing the sound of heavy boots walking around. I slowly walked back to his door and braced myself for a long minute before finally jolting the door open. But when I did, there was nothing. No one was in there. I quickly ran to his closet and slid the door open, knife in hand, but again, no one. At this point, I'm thinking that I'm going crazy, so I brush it off and I go about my day. But I would hear the footsteps from time to time, and then one weekend night, while my dad was working his 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. graveyard shift as a security officer, I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorknob jiggling on the front door. My eyes darted to the door as I froze, watching the doorknob jiggle for about a minute long before stopping. After it stopped, I got up to check the peephole, and again, there was no one. Needless to say, I got into the habit of sleeping with the lights on and a weapon close by after this. When my dad returned home in the morning, he says, "I think someone tried to break in, you know." I said, "What do you mean?" He signals for me to come to the outside of the door, and I see scratch marks and wood chipped away between the door and the frame around the knob. We chalked it up to maybe some junkie just trying to break in or something. We lived in an area that is notorious for drug use and poverty, but it definitely freaked us out. And my dad was always anxious to leave me alone after that. He also started texting more and calling during his night shifts to check in on me as well. As I wasn't sleeping much at the time, obviously, one school night while he was away working, everything was pretty calm to begin. No footsteps, no doorknobs jiggling, no ominous feeling in the apartment at all. I had texted my dad that everything was good and I was going to go to sleep. I had to get up early for school the next day as well. But I got up at around 6:30 in the morning and I got up to use the restroom. I was particularly tired this day and I didn't want to get into the shower yet, so I went to lay back down and scroll on my phone for a bit. As I'm laying in bed, I hear the front door unlock. Now, my dad usually gets off at about 8 a.m., but I assume maybe he got out early as he did from time to time. "Dad?" I call out. No reply. But I heard a sort of grunting sound. It sounded like my dad was hurt maybe. like the sound you make when your lips are closed and you groan in pain if you stub your toe. But it was a deep groan. Working security at a casino and a bar, my dad often would get into altercations with drunk patrons, and when he had to remove them, sometimes it could get pretty physical. He'd been injured at work many times like this, so I said, "Dad, are you okay?" But there was no reply. The groaning became louder, and I heard a sort of dragging sound on the carpet simultaneously. I'm thinking that maybe he hurt his foot or his leg. The dragging and the groaning noise trailed from the living room to the kitchen and onto the tile floor. And then I heard the fridge open and then close. I called out one more time, "Dad," but there was no reply. Now I'm freaked out and sinking deep into my bed as my heart pounds. I heard the dragging noise on the carpet again, and the groaning noise started getting closer to my room. And then the groaning turned into a growling noise, like a dog or maybe a wolf. And quickly the growling was a snarling, evil sound that I cannot get out of my mind. I pulled the blankets over my head and started to cry and pray. I was shaking. The growling approached the doorway to my room. It was in my room now and really loud. I could hear the anger and the threat seemingly directed toward me. And then I heard the sound of a gust of wind. My light bulb suddenly blew out and the lights went off. It became dark and cold suddenly. My fight or flight kicked in at this point, and I jumped out of bed to face whatever it was, but I couldn't see anything. Except, strangely, a gallon of water from our fridge was now in the middle of the floor that was not there when I had gone to the bathroom minutes before. At this point, I'm too freaked out to pay that any mind, and so I run out of my room to the front door and see nobody in the living room. And weirdly, the front door is locked. I quickly unlock the door and run down the stairs crying. I immediately called my dad, who left work and rushed home. I waited at the bottom of the steps until he arrived. He thinks that I just had a bad dream to this day, but we moved out soon after because I just couldn't stand being there anymore. Whatever it was, it didn't seem like a trapped spirit or anything. I never had any other experiences like this anywhere that I've lived, before or since then. And it's my only true paranormal experience that I've ever had. To this day, I swear that it was a demon in that apartment that was mimicking my dad. But why that place, I have no idea. Why did it mimic my dad? I don't know. Whatever the case, I'm just really glad that it didn't follow me when we moved. But I will never, ever forget the sound of whatever it was growling at me. So I've never had any paranormal experiences before, but I'm a bit of a lurker here, so I thought that I would share this. So last night I woke up at 2:59 to go to the toilet. I checked the clock when I came back and it was 3 a.m. sharp. I was lying in my bed on my back and I fell asleep. But then I felt as if something was lifting me up from my backside, as if something in the mattress was pushing me up, and then I was in sort of a total sleep paralysis mode. My teeth were clapped really hard and I couldn't open my eyes or move or anything. I then remembered some stories from here, and in my head I started shouting, "I believe in God and Jesus Christ, and you have no power in my house. Get out and leave us alone." My husband was in bed, sound asleep. We also have a dog that was sleeping in the living room. I then managed to open my eyes slightly to see a shadow standing beside the bed on my side, looking down and floating. It had no face or features, but I could tell that it was sort of looking down based on the angle of where the head was. I kept repeating the same thing in my head, and it started to float towards the door, passing over the bed. It didn't really have a distinct body shape, just a sort of black cloud with a head, and suddenly looked backwards towards me, and for eyes it seemed to have like white dots that were looking at me. Whatever it was, it terrified me, and it felt evil. He had left the room and my paralysis suddenly ended. The dog then rushed to our room and slept there till morning, which was a bit odd. Mind you, I kept having nightmares afterwards and kept hearing a male voice saying something as if he was calling my name in a voice similar to my husband, but not quite. And when I told my husband, he said that he had had nightmares all night as well, and felt no movement on the bed. I burned sage and prayed, but I don't know what that was, and I really don't know what to do about any of this. I would pretty much rather not see it again, as it scared the heck out of me. So if you have any insights on what this was or what I could do to get rid of it permanently, then please do share. We live in the inner city of Melbourne, Australia, in an apartment building relatively new, so I don't know if the place is haunted or what that was, but I sure hope that it doesn't come back. This happened in 2022. 2 months in, I had bought my first house, and it was an old farm far from any neighbours, except an old lady, joint ownership, in the centre of France. I was living alone, 28 years old, and I was fairly unlucky because I broke my right hand the first day that I went there. Then my horse broke my nose accidentally 1 month after as well. This was during the summer, and there was a storm that night, a thunderstorm in fact. I was sleeping in my room, almost naked because of the heat, in the converted attic of the house. At 11:30 p.m., I woke up because I had heard a sound coming from the second room. It was the room adjacent to mine, so only a wall between it. It sounded like someone was standing behind the wall, in fact, between both rooms. I heard floor noise. It was different from any wind and beams which are creaking all the time. Not persuaded by that at all, though, that someone could be there in that place. I was too lazy, but I had to ensure that no one was actually in the house, well, in case of a break-in or whatever. But before I get to this, I should probably explain that the second room has an access to the attic. It's accessible by a stair with an old door leading directly to the outside. And it was in this attic, the undeveloped part, that there was a kind of mezzanine there. When I went into the room, still naked mind you, with my fractures, I didn't find anyone there, but the door between the rooms was open. I went to the top of the mezzanine when I saw a shadow take refuge under the mezzanine out of my sight. It was at that moment that I realized that I wasn't alone in my house, and even if I wasn't sure about what I had seen, I went back quickly into my room, which had unfortunately no way of locking it. I sat myself against the only window in the room, and then I called my ex-boyfriend, who was a policeman. He lived about 10 minutes from home. I stayed there to be able to escape through that window if need be, if the intruder came by to my room. I really didn't know what to do at this point. I didn't want to hang around to find out, though. It was probably the best position that I could have been in at that time, but in any case, I practiced self-defense or martial arts a few years back, and if I had to fight, then I guess it was better than nothing. Fortunately, though, no one came into my room in that time, and my ex finally got there. Once he arrived, we went around the house together to find the intruder, but there wasn't anyone there. For a second, I believed that maybe I had just hallucinated everything. But then we heard the little girl of my ex screaming from outside. She was 6 years old, and my ex came with her because he was living in a too dangerous place to leave her alone, at his home that is. So he decided to bring her with him, telling her that they were coming here to fix some plumbing troubles or something, in order not to worry her, obviously. He left her in the car, and it was locked, obviously, but when we heard her, we rushed out to see what was going on. She was alone in the car, and she was crying. When we asked her why she was screaming, she told us that she saw a guy coming out of the house, but the old door, overlooking the attic where I was. Then he approached the car quickly, shook the door handle, and this was all according to her words. Thankfully, he didn't get in because the car was locked and he ran off, but I really still don't know who that guy was, what his intentions were, why he was standing in the place next to my room while I was sleeping, why he tried to take the car with the daughter of my ex inside of it, instead of just escaping. And I just cannot help but think that whoever he was, that he had very evil intentions. Since then, the old lady living close to me has told me that someone knocked at her door during the night, and that it happened a few times. Apparently, though, when she went to check, there was never anyone there. I live in a house which dates back to the late 1800s. Tons of history, and I looked into previous owners and know that they had children, most of whom sadly didn't survive very long. I've not had any experiences so far. I've lived here since October, but I do sometimes feel like I'm being watched. It's never felt malicious, I guess, but still a bit weird. However, today, I have a speaker plugged into my TV, which only ever activates usually when the TV is on. But when the TV was off, the speaker turned on alone. I really don't know how that's possible, because it can literally only turn on with power from the TV. It's a soundbar. Also, I was upstairs for hours organizing and tidying a room that I'd neglected, and I came back down to put something in the living room to find my salt lamp turned on. This is a lamp which only can be turned on by a remote, which is on the TV stand, and which definitely was not accidentally pressed or anything. It's also probably worth noting too that while I was sorting out stuff, my dog was sitting with his back to me facing open doors, almost as if he was watching out for something. I have no doubt that if there is something here that it's friendly. I have zero bad vibes, I guess you could say, but still, it is just a teeny bit unsettling. Also kind of fascinating, I guess, but I'd love to know your thoughts or possible debunks. I'm not one of these people who are dead set, pardon the pun, on everything being paranormal. So if you have any explanation as to how lights and speakers can turn on their own like that, then genuinely I would love to hear it. But if you do think that it is paranormal, I would also love to hear your thoughts and how to keep this whole thing friendly. My older brother recently moved into a house with his pregnant wife. This was last summer. My younger brother, he's not younger than me, just younger than my other brother, and Dad moved in October, and me and my mum, we moved in December. The house was made around the 1930s, and during these months, we encountered nothing out of the ordinary, except for when me and my mum moved in, I guess. The baby was safely born in November. During the summer to October, it was just my brother and his wife, nothing weird. The house has 2 floors plus a basement and a driveway in the back. Now, in December, my sister-in-law's phone wallpaper changed to Tom from Tom and Jerry, smoking a fat cigar. She left the phone on her bed on the 2nd floor, left for like 3 minutes and then came back, and it was changed. It was nothing too weird, I guess, because we thought that it was just a glitch, but then in mid-January, when my older brother and his friend were in the basement, there were 3 knocks on the basement back door, which leads to the driveway. There was also some movement outside, which my brother saw through the glass window. When I heard this, I thought that it must have just been the wind, but my older brother was really shook by this, which was weird for him. He was adamant that it was definitely a person or a figure at least. Then a few days ago, while I was passing my younger brother's room, I swore that I saw 2 feet on the bed. I thought that it was just my brother in his room, but when I went downstairs, as soon as I went, my brother came into the house through the front door. I asked him, "Hey, weren't you just upstairs?" And he said no to this. "Maybe it was a ghost, haha," he said. I was so sure, though, that I saw 2 feet that I actually thought that he was in his room, so I went back upstairs, retraced my steps, and there was nothing there. My eyesight isn't the best, I guess, but I don't know, it seemed real. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, I don't know. I also watch a lot of scary movies, and I guess that adds more to the fear, but yesterday we were wondering about how the phone wallpaper changed like it did, and we all agreed that no one did it, so we're all pretty serious people, and I don't actually think anyone would lie about it. My older brother said that maybe they changed it to Tom smoking a cigar because my dad smoked cigarettes in the back of the house. Not fat ones or cigars or anything, just regular ones. I guess it makes sense, but it just seems kind of dumb to me, I suppose. Is this thing toying with us? Is there even a thing that exists here? We still haven't told my younger brother about any of this because he's going to stay in the basement after the renovations are done. And all of this started when the basement renovations began. My younger brother doesn't want to even go to the first floor if there's no one in it, because he's actually pretty scared of it. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Is there something in my house, and if there is, can I do anything about it? So some years back, we bought a piece of property. I was walking around it, and a van was parked in the back of the woods somewhere. I called in the number on the van, and the wife of the owner called the police, and after a day of, well, BS really, they found him hanging in a tree on the back corner of the property, unfortunately. He died in the place that he loved the most, his wife said. Anyway, fast forward to one morning as the sun was coming up, and I heard footsteps running down the hall to the side of my bed. I have 2 boys, so this wasn't really alarming at all at the moment, but I was actually in the house by myself that day. I opened my eyes, and there was a blonde-haired boy in blue jean overalls standing next to my bed. I have blonde-haired children too, but I suddenly realized that this was not my kid, and all of a sudden the boy started to vanish from the head down, and soon was just gone. I slept with my pistol next to me for 2 nights after that, as if that would have done any good, but it was comforting, I guess. I rented the house out for years too, and I came back to live there, so I needed to change my address. I went to the local post office, and I was talking to the clerk, and she knew the address. She then said, "My dad actually ended himself on that property, you know." We talked a little bit, and I asked her about it. What was your dad like as a boy? What did he wear and look like as a kid? And my jaw dropped when she said blue jean overalls, and he had blonde hair. We talked about what I had seen, and she wasn't surprised at all, and that was honestly surprising to me, because apparently she had experienced things as well with her deceased dad. I never told my kids about this experience, but after finding out who the ghost was, I guess I wasn't really afraid of another encounter if it did happen. There were some noises and doors that were opened when I walked by that were closed the next time that I saw them. And you can say what you want, but I think that he came back as a boy that used to enjoy the land my house is on. He seems to be gone now, at least, because I've never seen or heard anything out of the ordinary in years now. But really, who knows? Maybe tonight or tomorrow or some other time, I'll experience something again. This happened about 5 years ago. So I had just gotten out of a 2-year-long relationship, living in the city I moved to my then boyfriend for. After he left, I felt lonely and heartbroken. I was stuck in the apartment that we had shared, so I downloaded Tinder to chat to guys as a way of coping with the breakup. There I matched with this guy. He was about 4 years older than me. He was extremely handsome and charming. He was very much into fitness and had an amazing body. After talking for a few days, he asked me to meet, and so we did. He came over to my house, and I was immediately attracted to him. He was a bad boy type, the kind I usually fall for, but he was also very sweet in the way that he talked to me. He kept complimenting me and doing sweet stuff to me. and after a few days of meeting, we ended up having sex, and it was honestly the best that I'd ever had. I felt this intense chemistry between us. We started hanging out and doing it a lot, in fact. At the time, I did smoke weed a lot. I knew that he smoked too and did some other things as well. I didn't really care much at the time, but eventually, he would keep asking me to hang out pretty much every day, begging me to come over because he missed me. When I told him that I was too tired, he would bribe me with stuff like saying that he would give me massages, weed, dinner, romantic things, give me the best night, etc. He didn't like it when I told him no. He would sometimes get angry even, send me a bunch of messages just pleading for me to come over. After every time that I'd been to his house, he would shower me with love via messages. He was so romantic, saying that I made him feel so amazing, that there was something special about me and that he loved being with me. He would often shower me with compliments, but then get angry when I said that I didn't have time to hang out with him. Now, at some point I was at his house. He got a phone call from someone. After he hung up, he told me that I had to go upstairs and hide because his baby mama was coming over. He didn't want her to see me because she was crazy. He told me some stories of crazy stuff that she had apparently done, and I believed him. He was very convincing, and I believe that this happened twice. Now, I know that I should have seen the red flags. I probably did to some extent, but I didn't care much. I kept hanging out with him a lot, even though I figured out that he was heavy on drugs. And one day, I was at his house and we had done the deed. I had smoked a lot and he was on some stuff. He wanted to go again, but he got frustrated that he couldn't get it up. He got mad and kind of blamed it on me not being firm enough on the grip. He kind of yelled at me to squeeze it harder, and he just kept getting more frustrated. Obviously, I felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave, but he wanted me to stay. He tried to continue, but it just didn't work. I was extremely uncomfortable and felt very embarrassed. After a while, I told him that I wanted to leave. He then told me to give back the weed that he gave me, as is his mind. It was his payment to me being with him. And at that, I was absolutely furious, and so I just grabbed my stuff and I walked out the door. He followed me, and at first he walked calmly about 30 meters behind me, begging me to stay with him, asking where I was going, and I just kept walking and saying no. But he then ran towards me. I picked up my phone to call a friend of mine because I could tell that he was getting aggressive. And then I turned around and saw him literally tear his shirt open and began stomping towards me. He grabbed my phone out of my hands, then kicked me in the stomach so hard that I fell into a ditch. He then smashed my phone to the ground and told me, "You're done." I thought that he was going to beat me up at this stage, but then it looked like he was actually trying to contain himself for a second, and just turned around and left. Obviously, I was mortified by what he had done. I ran away shaking. I can't even remember how I got home, but somehow I did. I was able to borrow a phone from someone and called my friend, I think, and he came over and I had bruises all over my stomach and legs, and I had no phone, obviously. It was then that I called the police using a friend's phone and told them that I wanted to press charges. A few days later, he messaged me saying that I tried to steal from him, that I took advantage of him just to get some weed. A few hours after that, he texted me saying sorry. A few more hours, he texted asking what had happened to me yesterday. Then a week later, he found out that I had reported him to the police, and he was mad. He said that he couldn't believe that I'd reported him. Then he told me that he would give me 2 new phones or whatever I wanted if I withdrew the report, that he wouldn't contact me anymore if I just did it. He just didn't want any trouble and didn't want to lose his daughter. I didn't answer. Then he sent me another message fabricating the whole story of what happened that night. He kept harassing me for weeks with messages. Some days he was begging us to get back together or to be friends, bribing me. Other days he was accusing me of random stuff, calling me names, etc. And that he had a great lawyer and that he would report me to the police for stuff that I had never actually done. He kept acting like a smart aleck, saying that he would beat me in court. It all became very chaotic in the end. After a few months, there was a trial as well. I couldn't attend physically, so I testified via a phone call. I was questioned about our relationship and the incident that night. He lied and made up stories about me, but no one believed him. As the trial was done, I received all the papers in the mail, and honestly, I was in shock when I read it. You see, he had previously been charged with violence and rape towards his ex. Apparently, there was also an incident where he had forced his ex-girlfriend to do things in front of other men and videotaped her. There were other girls too that had experienced similar things. Stuff like robbery, weapons, fights, violence and torture, you name it. He had been in jail multiple times as well, and I had no idea that I had been dealing with such a dangerous person. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he was a psychopath. He has no understanding of what he has done, and the sick part is that I recently came across a post about him on Facebook. Apparently, he's pretty popular with women lately on Snapchat and Instagram. He posts stuff about his life, whining about being beaten up by random men, being tortured and robbed and all that people follow him with guns allegedly. I've learned that the reason that he keeps being beaten up by people is that they know what he has done. He posted pictures of himself at the hospital to make people feel bad for him, and weirdly enough, they do. He makes women feel sorry for him. He says people lie and make up stories about him, and he gains pity. He then posts all the sweet replies and messages girls send him, saying stuff like he feels so grateful for all of their support. He's extremely good at manipulating people, and I honestly feel so lucky that I got away at the time that I did, and that it didn't escalate any further. I checked his Facebook recently too, and apparently he has a girlfriend now. I just pray that he doesn't hurt her in any way and that she gets out of there quickly, because Lord knows what that man is capable of. This was a couple of years ago now. I was still in college. I worked at my local high school in South Jersey on the night shift for some extra money. But unfortunately, the hours meant that I didn't really get to have a life during the week. I get a call from a friend group on a Friday before I headed into work saying that they were going to explore Clinton Road, which was known to be the scariest road in New Jersey. Obviously, I couldn't go, so I told them to let me know how they made out. Later in the night, I get a call from them, though, in a panic, saying that all these crazy things happened to them. They described what happened to them, how they threw coins over Ghost Boy Bridge, and they came back, a ghost truck following them, and the feeling of just being watched. Honestly, I thought that they were just hyping it up because of the fact that I missed out. So it was decided that we'd all go the next night, but this time I got to see it for myself. Something that I'd regret for the rest of my life. Us being from South Jersey, Clinton Road is a bit of a drive for us, about 2 hours, so there was plenty of time for us to get all hyped up and spooked out. Now, I can only describe myself as the manly man of the group, I guess, being 6'5" and 260 pounds, especially back then. I had the persona of, it's all made up, nothing will scare us, but boy, was I completely wrong. Right when we get there, the entire vibe changed from, oh, we're all going to be spooked to, oh wait, this is actually pretty creepy. The road, it's in the middle of the woods, houses few and far between. The first thing that we see when we get there is a small mini-castle-looking building. It's the best that I can describe it. And because of the far ride, we all had to pee at this point, so I went to the left, friend 2, Joe, went straight, and friend 3, Ha, went to the right. Friend 4 was female who stayed behind us in the road. After I was done, I immediately walked back along with Ha, but we noticed that Joe was walking towards the creepy building. I start shouting, asking what he was doing, and he turns back around with the look of shock. Me being completely confused, I ask, "What are you doing walking there?" And Joe swore up and down that I was actually behind the building waving at him to follow me to the building. So naturally, we're all getting pretty freaked out about that. We pull up to the bridge, Ghost Boy Bridge, and I check everyone for coins to make sure that they don't fake it just to scare me. We all throw the coins and, well, nothing happens. See guys, it's just all in your head. Let's go. So we all start walking back to the car, and then I hear clinking. I hear the coins hit the road. We sprint back to check, and we find the coins laying in the road. I was 100% convinced, though, that they were just messing with us, so I had the idea to mark a coin so they couldn't fake it. I threw the coin in the water, waited 5 minutes in silence, and nothing. See guys, let's go. But then, I hear the coins in the road again. I walk back and, well, it was a coin with the same exact markings that I had put on it. I'm extremely freaked out at this point, so we decided to go. Driving down the windy road in a newer sports car, we're all pretty freaked out and just want to leave at this stage. And that's when we see headlights appearing behind us, seemingly out of nowhere. Also, we didn't see them attached to a vehicle per se. I'm no car expert by any means, but I would almost bet my life on it that they were lights on an old truck, getting closer the faster that we went, taking bends at fast speeds that even a new truck wouldn't handle. Suddenly, though, the lights just disappear. So now, all in a panic, we decide to pull over to map our way out. There was dead silence, no lights except our headlights in the woods. And that is when we hear the typical woman ghost moan. And of course, what came with it was the typical woman in a white dress standing in the woods right next to our car, and suddenly she let out the loudest scream that I think I've ever heard. We also began screaming at this point to get out and go, go, go and all that. Eventually, we put the car into gear and we get the heck out of there. Once we make it back to the main roads, we decide to dig a little bit deeper on this road. And apparently, according to the sources that I found at least, the ghost truck tries to make people crash on Dead Man's Curve. Allegedly, there have been numerous bodies buried there from the famous murderer, the Iceman. On our way home, we wanted to go back again the next night, on the Sunday, but we suddenly pass an old rundown church that looks like it hasn't been used in like 50 years. And of course, the sign left out front says, "You need Jesus on Sunday." Safe to say, I never went back, and even to this day, the friend group still refuses to talk about what happened that night on Clinton Road. I do hope that one day we can talk about it again because, I don't know, the whole thing just seems like a memory now, and I just really don't want to forget it. As late teens, early 20s, growing up in South Jersey, my friend group was always getting into ghost hunting on haunted roads and buildings around New Jersey and surrounding areas. But we always had some crazy experiences, I guess you could say, and this one was really no different. During this, we had the original friend group, plus another one of our friends as well. Now one night, brainstorming what to do, we decided to go on a little ghost hunt trip in our area. Everyone knew of our friend group as the ones that would always be getting into these kinds of things, so we would always be getting tipped off by other friends outside of the group as to what places to check out. We were tipped off to do a little haunted road not far from us, and we decided, heck, why not? It's better than nothing and just sitting here. So we all hop in the car and start the little trip towards the road. On the way, we happened to see a Wawa, which, of course, we had to stop at. And per usual, we were always hyping each other up to see if we could spook the others. While waiting in line, I'm messing with one of the friends that's not in the ghost friend group, saying, you're scared to go, aren't you? When out of nowhere, we hear, what's the little one scared of? I say little because the guys in the friend group were all abnormal-sized humans, the smallest being roughly 6'3" and 240, where the little one was just a normal-sized typical guy. These guys straight up look like they just didn't belong there, to be honest. Some sort of backroads, Texas chainsaw looking fellas. But we explained to the guy and his friend that we were going ghost hunting on a road. And simply put, they said, it's not that scary. If you really want to be scared, go here instead. So we leave, and hesitantly we all agree to actually go to the new hunt instead of the first trip. We get there, middle of the woods. We notice that there are some trees cut down and laying on the sides parallel to the road. Deeper and deeper into the woods, pitch black, and that's when the nervousness is really starting to build. We pull up to this sort of monument to commemorate a plane crash that had apparently happened there years ago. There's dead silence, pitch black, only the light shining from the moon was our light other than the car. The light shining from the moon was our only light source, other than the car lights, that is. To put a little bit of fear into us as well, we dared the driver to shut the lights off, which was a big mistake. He completely shuts the car off. A few minutes go by and we see this absolutely massive, and I mean massive shadow crawl from behind the statue and start narrowing in towards us. When I say massive too, I'm 6'5" plus and 260, and this thing had me looking like a third grader. We all started panicking and zoom away into the car. A bit disoriented, we didn't realize that we were driving deeper into the woods, to where we would hit a huge sand opening, in which there were many ways to go from there. In the end, we decided that it was best to turn around and try to map our way out. While doing so, our radio cuts out to almost like an old-time fashioned music sort of thing. I happen to look up in confusion, and seconds after that, I see what I can only describe as a white face. Not a typical white face, but almost like a Jabberwocky's mask. Zero expression and almost a see-through body, if that makes sense. Just a face and then another and another. Now, I don't know if it was us just being disoriented and seeing things, or if this really was happening, but we all scream in unison, "Let's get out of here." So we fly out of the sand back on the same road where I had mentioned the trees earlier. Only this time on our way back, the trees, they were no longer parallel to the road, but actually in the middle of the road, blocking our exit. The driver, Joe, in a sports car, mind you, tells us to hold on, and we're driving on the side of the road next to the woods in what I can best describe as basically defying gravity to make our escape. We do manage to scrape through. Mind you, the car was a bit worse for wear afterwards, but we get out of there and we don't look back. Now, I don't know for certain if this place is legitimately haunted, or if we were set up by those two guys earlier in the night, but two things are for certain. One is, I'd bet my life that it's a combination of both a haunting and a bit of a setup. And two, I for sure will never be going back there again to find out. This is the story of my worst hitchhiking experience. This incident was really sketchy, but I still wouldn't give up my love for hitchhiking. I'm a 21-year-old, 20 at the time, man from Finland. So this happened on the 2nd of December last year in Kalamata, Greece. I had been hitchhiking for quite a while at that point. I had started from Budapest and had hitchhiked through 7 different countries with only ever positive outcomes. The story begins around 11 a.m. on Saturday. So some hours before I had awoken in my hammock, which was hung up behind the castle ruins, in the only place that had trees that weren't someone else's olive trees, I was tired from the lack of sleep caused by the cold night and early wake-up by noises of the busy market across the street. And after a quick tour of the town and some breakfast, it was time for hitchhiking. I made a sign with the words Athens and Sparta in Greek. I was standing by a road leading to a roundabout where the first exit goes around Arapoli, with the second towards Sparta and the third towards Athens. A lot of cars drove by, but nearly all of them took the first exit. It took at least an hour for the first car to stop. It was this small, quite old, worn-out white car, and driving it was an older guy, around 60, who looked a little dirty, I guess. Greasy hair, some teeth missing, and big nose filled with visible blackheads. He didn't really speak English, but I could understand that he was going to Sparta. I was a bit frustrated by the fact that pretty much all of the cars were going towards Arapoli, so I thought this might be the only chance, and so I jumped in. We are trying to have a conversation, but without a shared language, it's pretty much impossible. We introduce ourselves, and I try to explain where I'm from. He smokes and offers me a cigarette, but I refuse it. We drive just shy of 6 kilometers before the guy suddenly makes a left turn, and we end up in his yard of all places. He stops the car, gets up, and signals me to follow, so I do. I take my bags and feel a bit confused. It's a small house on the mountains surrounded by sheep and olive trees. There's a dog sleeping in the sun, but it doesn't seem to be bothered by us at all. We walk to this balcony or terrace that surrounds his house. I put my bags inside of his house and join him sitting on the balcony. He lights up another cigarette and asks if I want to eat something or maybe take a shower. I refuse, and with the help of Google Translate, I ask why we aren't going to Sparta. He answers that I can sleep at his house and he'll drive me there tomorrow. I try to explain that I would like to get to Sparta or even to Athens today, so staying at his place isn't really an option. I'm pointing out that there's not that many cars going past this house, like one every 15 minutes, and only some 4 or 5 hours of daylight left, so every minute is valuable to me. He doesn't really seem to understand me, so I get up and I walk through the door to grab my bags. I put my backpack on and pick up my other bag. I turn over and see him inside. I try to walk out, but he stops me and guides me to the side. He then locks the door and turns to me. At this moment, I'm not panicking or anything because I assume that this is a form of hospitality and he's just doing this jokingly to offer me some food or whatnot. I keep saying no to him, but he doesn't seem to care. Now he's standing right in front of me, and I'm starting to feel very disturbed by his presence. For some reason, too, I keep staring at his blackhead-filled nose. The image still haunts me, in fact. He opens his mouth and raises his right hand in a sort of loose fist in order to show me some blowjob motion. I'm still saying no to him. He suddenly grabs me by the crotch, though, and I can feel this cold tingling sensation shivering through my body as my hair suddenly stands on end. I keep saying no, and I start to raise my fist in order to hit him. We stand like this for a couple of seconds, and thank God he lets go. I'm still feeling the urge to hit him, but I don't. He asks, no sex, and I almost shout out no at him in a tone that makes it sound like I'm questioning the question itself. He then opens the door, and I'm suddenly free. I walk out, feeling so creeped out by the experience. I walk past the dog to the road, and I see 2 pickup trucks on the other side of the road. The trucks are surrounded by a group of hunters carrying shotguns on their shoulders. This makes me instantly feel a lot safer. I keep walking by the road for a while before a car passes me by. It's quite warm and I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I empty one of my water bottles and turn it upside down, showing it to the cars passing by, so they would think that I'm out of water. This works and the second car stops. Eventually I get to Sparta and later that day to Athens safely, but I felt disgusting until I got to take a shower. All the kindness I had experienced while hitchhiking before this event had made me too comfortable, I guess, and Maybe I'd let my guard down or whatever. I think humans are good by nature, but probably trusting every stranger is a bit of a stretch, right? Stranger danger, in my opinion, is still overrated though. I'm quite a lean guy too, and not that strong, so I was lucky that the situation didn't end up worse. Though I do think that I could have beaten that also very lean shepherd grandpa. As a safety measure, I carried a knife with me too, but it wasn't on me at that moment of the incident. Also, the knife could have made the situation worse. Obviously, I wouldn't have done anything unless it was absolutely necessary. My mind was running like 1,000,000 miles an hour during and after this experience, and I thought about everything, how it could have turned out in the worst case. I thought about beating the guy, telling the incident to the hunters and calling the police, but in the end I ended up doing nothing and just sort of walked away. I hope karma gets to him eventually, but who knows. After this experience, I still think hitchhiking is the best way to travel, and I definitely am not giving it up, but I certainly am a lot more careful about how I do it. I'm from a small town that houses 3 different elementary schools, and only one middle school and a high school, connected by the gymnasium and a tunnel between the 2 buildings. I had lived there my entire life, and I went to a different school than most other people mentioned in this story. Now, back when I was in middle school, I had a litany of bullies who loved making every moment of my day a living hell. They did pretty much everything that you could think of, ranging from pranks in the middle of class to downright physical assault even. But all of them were nothing compared to this one girl that I met at the beginning of 7th grade, whom I'm going to refer to as Sadie. Sadie was a stereotypical mean girl in every sense of the word. Loved fashion, had a gaggle of friends willing to do her bidding, and every guy was into her or wanted her. She was the kid with the highest amounts of detentions, argued a lot with the teachers, and the principal pretty much did nothing about her actions. She also made a habit of having fun with some specific kids, which included me. I was a plus-sized kid at the time, a scaredy cat, gullible, and a bit of a pushover as well, but I did try to do well in school and I just kept to myself. But that didn't do much at all. As soon as Sadie took notice of me, she took it upon herself to make sure every time that we even saw each other, she'd make me miserable. At the beginning, it wasn't anything much. She started rumors about me, talking about me online. I didn't have social media yet, so I didn't find that out until much later. And in school as well, she said things, and threw things at me that ranged from her garbage to one of her textbooks. It wasn't terrible at first. Sadie was annoying, sure, but I had workarounds, so I just ignored her. But when other kids saw that I wasn't going to fight back, they joined in and took things way too far. Almost daily, I had been chased in the halls, ganged up on in the bathrooms, had my food stolen, gotten blamed by the teachers for their dumb actions in class, and many other things. These kids, they had me on edge and feeling practically worthless for the entire school year, to the point of me considering just running away to avoid the heck out of going to school. Why didn't I tell the school, you may ask? Well, I tried, dozens of times. Teachers, guidance counselors, even the principal. But they didn't care. The school was honestly not the best, and they were pretty negligent to everything that didn't involve funds, sports events, and GPA for the year. So they gave no heed to me when I tried to tell them what was going on with Sadie and her lackeys. These are some of their real responses from the incidents that happened, though. When I had gotten my backpack thrown down the stairs and a calculator inside that I brought from home got broken, "It's your property, your problem," is what they said. When Sadie had written a fat joke alongside of a slur on my locker door in permanent marker, "You have no evidence that it was her." When Sadie's boy toy and his friends cornered me outside the changing rooms for gym to ask me for something, they were probably just kidding around. All of them were spearheaded by Sadie, who was practically in charge that year, and nothing she did was getting her into trouble. Summer could not come fast enough that year. And by the time the 7th grade was over, they let those kids get away with so much that I honestly gave up on trying to get outside help at that point. As I got some personal help that summer, I decided that things would be different by the time that I had to go back to school for the following year. I was not going to be Sadie's personal punching bag anymore, in other words. When 8th grade started up, I was ready. I learned some MMA self-defense, I defended myself vocally, I wasn't so quiet anymore, and I started to fight back. And, what did you know, it worked. None of the old bullies from last year even looked my way again. Except for Sadie, who still tried to pull her usual stunts. But the longer I showed her that I didn't care, the more it seemed to get to her. Honestly, it felt like ample revenge to all of the stuff that she put me through last year. Sadie, however, would not let it go for the life of her. I didn't know it then, but this whole act of hers would end up taking a really bad turn. One day, I was walking to the gym with Sadie following close behind me. She didn't share a gym class with me, but she did like following me around in between classes and trying to get a rise out of me. This day, however, was not great for me, and I don't exactly remember why now, but I was stressed out and I kept getting really ticked off over whatever went wrong that day. Sadie following behind, trying out different insults and comments about me, it must have just sent me over the edge. In a quick motion, I stopped walking, spun around, pushed Sadie backwards and spit towards her, with it landing on her leg. I told her to just get lost and to leave me alone. I didn't know what I was really expecting her reaction to be, but it sure as heck wasn't what she did. Sadie just sort of stood there, frozen, staring at me. I expected her to be coughing up blood from rage or her screaming or anything at all, but instead she just stood there, as if a deer in the headlights. I didn't think about it at that time, as I left for gym not long after and eventually forgot about it. But after school, I was walking across the school building to head for the parking lot next to the high school building. Everything felt normal until I saw Sadie not far behind me. I didn't think anything weird of it, so I ignored it and kept walking, until I noticed that she was taking the same path I was to the buses. This wouldn't be too odd, I guess, if she actually rode the buses at all. Sadie walked to and from school every single day. If not that, someone would always come and pick her up, but the carpool lot was in the opposite direction of the buses. I took a different path than my normal route, around the back of the school. I looked back to check and, yep, Sadie was taking the exact same path I was, and she stopped walking every time that I looked back at her. I began picking up the pace a bit, and from behind I could hear her running to catch up to me. By the time that I was nearing the bus lot, she was somewhere around maybe 10 feet right behind me, still jogging to follow me. I definitely did not want her to learn which bus was mine, nor did I want her to follow me home, so I decided to try and fake her out. I jumped onto a different bus, much to the dismay of the driver, and Sadie ran in after me. After she got in the front, the bus driver yelled at her about something, and I ran off and raced to my actual bus, which was all the way on the other end, where this particular bus was. I got in, and the bus drove away just as Sadie got off to see where I went. Now, the next day I didn't see Sadie anywhere at school. Not in any of the classes, not at lunch, not even after school either. I asked, but nobody knew where she went. This went on for the rest of the week. The bus incident took place on a Monday, and the disappearing act happened on the Tuesday. By Thursday, I began to relax about the whole thing. I still didn't understand what Sadie was doing with the whole bus incident, but as long as she was gone, things felt, well, pretty okay. That is, until Friday afternoon came along. Like the last few days, Sadie wasn't there, so I was pretty relaxed for the most of it. When the end of the school day came, I was about to walk out of the front doors to the building when something stopped me. I just had a sudden horrible feeling in my stomach, telling me not to go outside. I had no idea where that came from, but I thought it was just my leftover anxiety playing tricks on me, so I headed out anyway, not still twisting. The middle school and the high school were all part of one connecting path system, which means that we all had hallways and walkways connecting both the main middle school and the main high school buildings, with one long sidewalk path out front. The parking lot where I had to walk to my bus was on the opposite end of this long sidewalk, which ran in front of both the middle school and in front of the high school too. This can make for a pretty long walk, and the doors leading into the high school, often flooded with students, make for some interesting obstacles. This would all come into play when this happened too. So I just walked down the outside stairs to the sidewalk when I saw someone run around a corner from the building. I look over and it was Sadie, looking completely ticked off, as bad as a rabid dog, full sprinting right towards me. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my whole life, running off nothing but pure adrenaline and fear. Sadie was catching up quickly behind me though, and all I could do was run and pray for help. I dodged between crowds of kids and just tried to lose her somewhere in the masses, not caring at all if I bumped into other people, only afraid that Sadie was still behind me. By the time that I reached the buses, I didn't see her anywhere, so I stopped and nearly collapsed to catch my breath. I felt relief for only a second, until she popped out of nowhere from the side of the crowd and lunged at me. Sadie grabbed me by my hair and backpack, swinging me around in a circle as I tried to get her off of me. She kept pulling and jerking so much that I felt my hair being ripped out at some points, but she kept going. I screamed for help, kicking and punching blindly in Sadie's direction, but either nobody wanted to get involved or were too scared to break us up because there was nobody who came forward. Sadie let go of my hair to reach for something behind her, and what happened next was only a miracle. My older brother was walking out of high school drinking a soda when he saw the scene and ran to help. He was the only one who knew about Sadie and recognized her when he had gotten to school in the mornings. He threw his soda at Sadie's head, which startled her enough to let me go and drop whatever she was holding. I grabbed my brother and we took off for the bus, making it just before it drove off. After we found a seat, I looked back outside, and what I saw still gives me chills. Sadie was on the ground, arms pinned by a teacher, and right on the ground next to her was an open hunting knife. And I knew without a doubt that it was definitely hers because of the sound that I had heard when she dropped it earlier. Next Monday, I got a call down to the office where my brother was also waiting. We got pulled into the counselor's office where there were 2 police officers waiting. Apparently, after we ran, a high school teacher saw Sadie picking up the weapon and apprehended her while another person called the police. They got Sadie into interrogation and now they needed to hear what happened from me. I practically broke down right there and then and told them everything. What Sadie did to me last year, what I almost did because of her torment, the bus incident the week prior, and what happened on the sidewalk too. My brother, he put his arm around me while I just sat there nearly sobbing my words out. The police and the counselor just sat there writing down what I said, but they looked on sympathetically. One of the officers asked me if I would like to tell my parents so they could press charges. At this point, I just wanted everything to end about this horrible situation and to just be done with it, so I just told them to do whatever they wanted. I just wanted this to stop. The counselor could tell that I was already upset enough, so he sent me back to class and me and my brother made a promise to never speak about this again. Sadie ended up getting into juvie for the rest of the school year, all the way until halfway through the second semester of freshman year of high school. The school, it also had some changes to it too. Police officers were now on duty during school hours in the middle and high schools. We had stricter policies with bullying, and kids could now stay with teachers before, during, after school if they needed to. I never did see Sadie again after that, not even in passing, in fact. I later learned from one of her old friends that after senior year, she dropped out to get her GED because the incident on her police record meant college was, well, impossible. It's been over 9 years since that day on the sidewalk, and I'll admit that this is honestly not as bad as what other kids probably had to go through, but I still feel the trauma from that time in middle school, and especially from what Sadie did to me. After middle school, I had developed depression, severe social anxiety, and PTSD from the bullies. I can't fully blame the situation for everything, as maybe if I just pushed a little bit harder with the teachers and the principal, maybe this wouldn't have happened in the first place, but eventually things did end up getting better. I just wish that I could go back to my 13-year-old self that had to endure all of that, to say that everything was going to be okay. I'm doing better now. I'm looking into therapy. I'm in university right now too, and I cannot be prouder of how far I've come. Thankfully, I'm doing better now, and I'm looking into therapy too. Also, I'm in university right now, and to be quite honest, I couldn't be prouder of how far I've come. My female friend came to visit me for a long weekend, and I, a 22-year-old female, won't be letting her stay with me ever again. We were friends for less than 3 months before we both moved to separate states and continued our friendship virtually until now. It has been a healthy friendship, I guess, with open communication. We have had our disagreements, but mostly always talked it out and moved on. They mostly revolve around her believing that I don't open up enough, and for me, she does things that are inconsiderate at times, like be jealous of my long-term friends, to their faces, and have an odd attitude problem at times. Only has been shown maybe 3 times, but still. She can also be a bit obsessive, and she gets upset when I don't text her for more than a day. She's got loads of my photos saved to her phone and remembers every little thing about me, and even has a list of my interests. And look, I know that's a bit weird, but I've seen it as endearing. That is, until now. So, the first day of the trip was great. She was bubbly and brought me a gift with a sweet note of appreciation. We went clubbing and headed to bed separately for the night. This is where things got a bit weird. Now, remember, we slept separately. Well, I woke up and she was in my bed. But not in my bed. She was sitting upright on the top of the blankets next to me with her feet straight out and her back against my headboard while looking forward. I was startled and said, "Oh," instinctively. She just looked at me. She never said that she was waiting for me to wake up, or maybe she was uncomfortable on the couch. Nothing. Then she left my room. I have no clue how long she was actually sitting there for. Day 2, in the morning, we walked the city where she was engaged and wanting to hold my hand while we were out and about. By midday, still day 2, her attitude had shifted completely, and she is near mute now. She isn't conversing with me, enjoying any activities, or even smiling anymore. At the bar, arcade, or even at home watching movies. You know how those driving games take a sort of silly little photo for your profile pic on the leaderboard? I was blowing a kissy face in mine. I glanced at hers and even snapped a pic without her noticing. Her head was tilted forward looking up at the camera, and she was blank-faced, and you could mostly see the whites of her eyes. It was like the film poster of a horror film. See The Orphan 2009 for what it may have looked like. Anyways, for the rest of the trip, she continued to not smile. She was cold to every service worker. She responded with one-word answers, otherwise complained about any and everything. I asked, "Are you okay?" a couple of times, and she replied, "I'm fine," avoiding eye contact every time. Car rides were silent, dinners were silent. The final day, I drove her to the airport at 3 a.m. I asked if she enjoyed her visit, and she said it was okay, it was fine. I told her that I enjoyed having her. She boarded her flight and she left. Now, I cannot figure out what caused this 180-degree shift. I mean, I paid for everything, took her to all sorts of events that she wanted to go to, and even took a day off, my first sick day ever, to take her to more. I felt myself overcompensating because I felt insecure of being a terrible host or something. I've had several friends stay with me and express to me that they enjoyed themselves so much that they never wanted to leave. I don't believe I did anything so wrong to ruin this trip or whatever. When she arrived home, though, she didn't contact me, but she posted photos and videos of me captioned "mine" on her social media. I haven't brought this conversation to her yet. All of my family and friends believe that I narrowly avoided a Selena Yolanda, a Lifetime film situation, and that I was potentially with someone very unstable. What do you guys think? So I've never shared this with anyone except my wife and my mother. Growing up, we lived in an old townhouse complex. I always used to wake up terrified, unable to move anything except for my eyes, and there would be a man standing at the foot of my bed wearing a cowboy hat, arms crossed. He would just stand there and then he would be gone, and then I could move again. This happened to me from the ages of about 6 to 12 until we moved. Not every night, but maybe about once a month or so, I would say. I never told anyone about it for years. I just kept it to myself. In my early 20s, I was visiting my parents and finally told my mother about what used to happen. She was absolutely floored, and then went on to tell me when we lived in that house, it used to happen to her as well. For about the same amount of years until we moved and they bought the house that they now live in. I'm not quite sure how to explain the feeling of both relief and terror that I felt knowing that A, I wasn't crazy, and B, this man was also troubling my mother. My dad worked in a remote work camp and was gone 15 days at a time. This only ever happened when he was away. We talked to him about it after we discovered that we both had these experiences, and he thinks that we're nuts. Anyway, I just wanted to share this. I drove past the old house that this happened to me in, and even just being close to it, man, it gave me the creeps. I remember once my grandmother came to visit when we lived there, and I'll never forget that she just looked around and said, "This is a busy place." Another strange thing that used to occur in the same house is that we had 2 cats and they used to just sort of sit at the bottom of the stairs and look up at the landing, like they were watching someone. The landing at the top, it overlooked the stairs, and I used to feel like someone was looking down at me when going up them all the time. The one cat that we had, he would just sit there sometimes for like an hour or more just staring. The bedrooms were on the top floor. Anyways, thanks for listening, and it feels good to have this finally off my chest. I'll also add that I had no other experiences since then. When we first moved, I was terrified that whatever used to haunt my nights would find me again. After all, the house that my parents bought, it was only about 2 blocks away. So I've spent about 2/3 of my life trying to debunk this one or come up with a reasonable explanation. When I was in 5th grade, I rode the bus with a girl who was a grade or 2 below me. We lived on opposite sides of a rather large apartment complex, but could still walk to each other's homes if we wanted to. Her name was Micah. Micah was born in Romania and had moved here a few years prior to me meeting her. She had heterochromia. Micah had brown eyes, but half of one of her irises was blue. This is relevant later. Now, her family was off, for a better word. I went over to her apartment a few times to hang out with her and remembered seeing a lot of unusual decor in her home. Lots of candles, a few altars, and a lot of taxidermy as well. Her mother would get very upset any time that she brought friends over, so typically she would sneak myself and a few of our other friends in anytime her mum was out shopping. But my mother was pregnant at the time and often felt sick, so I never brought my friends over unless she was out shopping or at the doctor's or whatever. And so she had never met Micah. A lot of the other kids were scared of her or felt sort of uneasy around her, I guess. None of our mutual friends could explain why. I did too at times, I'll admit, for some unknown reason, but as a fellow outcast, we stuck by each other's sides in the end. After a few months of knowing each other, she started telling me that her family followed a belief system similar to paganism. I forgot exactly what she called their religion, but it wasn't Wicca or pagan or any other common one, for lack of a better word again, spiritual belief system. And Micah started claiming that she had special powers. I immediately called bull on this and told her to prove it, and she responded by saying that she would shapeshift into a cat and visit me later that evening. My family and I lived on the 3rd floor of our apartment building. There were no fire escapes, balconies, or anything like that. We barely even had window ledges. As a side note too, I do love cute stuff. Hello Kitty, Care Bears, My Little Pony, all that good stuff. My best friend at the time was very into fashion and loved to act like a high schooler, and the few times that she saw me in cartoon PJs, she made jokes. So I stopped wearing anything like that to school or sleepovers, almost a full year prior to me meeting Micah. I went to bed at my normal bedtime of 9:30, wearing some Care Bear pajamas that my mum had bought me a week prior. Nobody had seen me in them aside from my parents, and around 3 a.m. that night, I woke up to hear scratching at my window. I jumped out of bed, looked out of my window, and saw a black cat staring directly at me. The cat was sitting on the very thin window ledge and raised its paw at me, as if it was waving at me. Freaked out, I told myself that it was a dream, and so I went back to sleep, I guess. That morning, while my mum was cooking breakfast, she asked if I had heard anything weird outside the night before, so I asked what she meant. I saw the weirdest thing last night. I heard scratching at my window. I got up to see what it was, and I saw a black cat on the window ledge. It looked like it was trying to open my window. I sat there in silence, unsure of what to say. My mum continued. I was afraid it was going to fall, so I brought it inside, carried it downstairs, and put it outside. But you should have seen its eyes. It had one eye that was half blue. I've never seen a cat like that before. I instantly felt so sick that I couldn't speak or finish my breakfast. Not wanting to approach Micah after all of this, I stood off to the side away from all the other kids until she walked up to me. "Hey, Gloomy Bear, why didn't you let me in last night?" I was completely stunned. I could have died. At least your mum was nice enough to take me downstairs. I stopped hanging around her as much after that. Our building caught on fire a few weeks after all this happened, and we ended up moving a few towns away. I haven't seen or heard from her since then, and to this day, my mum still remembers that cat. She'll mention it in passing every few years and make comments about how weird it was that a cat could have gotten up on that ledge and was trying to seemingly get in like that. For the last 20 years, I've been racking my brain looking for any explanation as to how this could have all happened, but I just haven't been able to come up with one. So, if anyone has one, then genuinely, I would love to hear it. This all took place in the mid-90s in a little town called Ottawa in Kansas. These are all true stories of experiences that I had while living in that house. I'll be sharing these experiences in chronological order, but first I'll describe the layout of the house. So, from front to back, you walk into the den, and moving forward you enter into the kitchen with a doorway to your right that leads to a bathroom and a master bedroom. If you continue through the kitchen, it leads to a dining room and living room on the left. If you go through the dining room further to the back of the house, it leads to a doorless room that we used for a computer room, and then 2 more bedrooms in the back. I share all of this because, over the years, family members switched rooms. So, the first experience happened not long after moving in. At the time, my mum had started a new relationship and we moved in with him. His mum also lived there as well, and she had the master bedroom at the front of the house. My mum and her new boyfriend, they had the room at the very back of the house, and I was in the room next to them. Now, one night, I heard all of my mum's music boxes just start playing out of nowhere. She had these painted clowns and such that sat on satin pillows and played music. They weren't creepy to me until this night, I suppose, but anyways, I hear them just all going off, and in my kid mind, I'm just sort of ticked off that my mum is in there playing when she told me that it was bedtime. But they just kept playing and playing, all at the same time. It was years later that she, my mum, finally told me that she wasn't playing with them. The second thing that happened was probably the scariest experience of my life. I was still in one of the back bedrooms, but by this time my step-grandma had moved out, so my mum and her boyfriend were in the master bedroom at the front of the house. I was alone in the back. I have siblings, but they were back and forth between my mum and dad, so at this point I was the only kid there. My mum and we had just come home from Walmart, and she had gotten me The Nightmare Before Christmas on VHS. And yes, I'm showing my age there, but it was late, so she and I could watch it the next day. I put it in my dresser and I went to bed. It was still wrapped in the cellophane and still in the Walmart bag. And as I was falling asleep, I heard the plastic of the bag. Even with my nightlight on, I couldn't see anything. I was scared though, so I gently tossed my big white cat Muffin Man onto the floor at the foot of my bed in the hopes that he would scare whatever it was away. And instead, he literally took off. I kept hearing the plastic and was literally petrified. I couldn't even scream, I was so scared. I eventually woke up, and when I did, the movie was now out of the case and on the floor. And honestly, I simply cannot explain how that happened. Now, the third experience, I had a friend over, and this story still gives her chills as well. She had recently lost her mum in a car accident, and this was another attempt of her sleeping over. She would try, but she missed her mum and just wanted to be with her family. But this time, she actually stayed the whole night. The experience itself wasn't scary for me, but I had a poster of The Crow. It was my first poster ever and I loved it, but when I woke up, it was tacked upside down. I certainly wouldn't have done that to Brandon Lee, and when my friend saw that, she turned white and she never spent the night again. I know it wasn't her, and at that time my little brother was living with us again, but there's no way that he could have reached the tacks at the top of the poster like that, so again, I just don't know how this happened. Now, my fourth experience was probably the second scariest one. We had cats at that time, but one day, in the middle of the day, my brother was down the street playing football at the school and I was home alone with my mum. I was in the computer room and she was in the kitchen. The day before, my little brother had been pretending that he had caught an alien. He had a huge plaster E.T. piggy bank that was probably like 1.5 to 2 feet tall. It was pretty ridiculous really, but he had a rope tied around it because he had caught it, you know. So I'm at the computer and all of a sudden I hear a loud crash from the rooms in the back, and here comes my cat Jara, with the other end of the rope tied around her tail. Mind you, Jara was a tortie. They're kind of known for just being all around crazy, but for anything to keep that cat still long enough to tie something around her tail, well, that's kind of mind-boggling. But something had definitely tied it around her tail like that. I mean, it wasn't an accident, there was a bow and everything, and broke off E.T.'s head in the process. Again, I cannot explain any of these experiences. My mum ended up having a priest come in and bless our home. He stole my stone collection and Dreamcatcher. Still pretty ticked off about that, by the way. But we did a little bit of research and found that the property had actually burned down in the past. I cannot remember the dates now, but I don't think that the spirit or whatever it was demonic. I actually think that it was a little girl named Margaret. But I'm curious as to what everyone else thinks. I'll do a little bit more digging and see if I can find any more info about the fire, but yeah, really at this point, that's all I've got. I was 11 years old when this happened. I'm female and currently 24. I was visiting my dad and stepmom over the summer in Saskatchewan, Canada. My dad worked long days during the week, so on her day off, he planned for my stepmom to take my sister, 8 at the time, and I out for a day to get some bonding time in with us, as we didn't know her super well yet. She took us to get our nails done, to the mall, and on the way home we stopped at a McDonald's. We planned on eating inside the restaurant, but it was very busy, so my stepmom asked my sister and I to find a table and wait there while she went to the counter to order our food. It was around then that I noticed this rough, older-looking woman, possibly 60s or 70s, looking towards the direction of the table my sister and I were seated at. All I could remember is thinking, she looked like a drugged-out Susan Boyle. She looked possibly homeless and addicted, so I didn't give her much of a thought, letting her do her own thing, and I just tried to talk to my sister about random stuff. Once my stepmom came back to the table, this woman was also seemingly already approaching us, and then stopped beside us. She just said hello, so we all kind of said hi back and tried to ignore her. She asked if we were my stepmom's daughters, so she says they're my stepdaughters, trying to be simple to kind of shut her down. The lady says that we were beautiful girls and begins to walk towards the door. She stops one last time and asks, how old are they? We had the impression that she was on her way out, so my stepmom just says to her like 11 and 8. Her eyes, though, they lit up and she looked at me with a sort of strange look. I've always wanted an 11-year-old, she said. I'd buy her from you. That definitely crossed a line, so my stepmom finally tells her that we're trying to eat lunch and asks her what she's even saying in a somewhat aggressive tone. The lady got one last look at me, and then she finally left. She definitely didn't have the money to buy me, even if I was for sale anyway, so I wasn't too worried. But I do think that she was possibly on some drugs and not in her right mind. But knowing my shy self at 11, I wouldn't have known how to get rid of this lady if she had tried to talk to us without my stepmom there. We weren't super close then, but I respected her a lot after that day for being ready to protect us, even in a minor situation like this. This actually happened just last night for me. I was almost home after a long day of traveling, and it was approximately 1 in the morning as I rounded a corner and stopped at the intersection right near my home. The light was red, and as I slowed to a stop, out of the corner of my eye I saw 3 people on the sidewalk. They were all dressed in black and wearing white face masks or face paint or something, maybe a combination of the two even. One was crouched on the ground, while the other 2 were standing crooked. They were still as statues when I came to a stop, but when I looked at them, they all started crawling or walking towards me. I was absolutely exhausted at this stage, and apparently my instinct in moments of terror is to just laugh and shake my head like I was in on the joke or whatever. They were super close to my car in the end, but thankfully the light turned green and I was able to get out of there before they reached my car. Since you could see the corner of my house from the intersection, I ended up just driving for quite a while and then turning around once it felt like enough time had passed, so that they wouldn't follow my car pulling into the street that I lived on. I imagine it was just some teens playing a prank or whatever, but afterwards I was thinking about it being a school night, and most people wouldn't be having sleepovers in the middle of the week or anything. I'm debating whether it's worth calling the non-emergency line to report it, just in case. Regardless, I won't be going out past sundown for quite some time, and I'll likely invest in some door lock reinforcements too after that, because honestly, who knows what they were up to. I've always been aware, growing up in a house of old-time Romani people gives you that. I say aware in respect of that, to quote Shakespeare, that there are more things in heaven and earth. There's places I've been where I'll never go again, and here's one of the last of them. I'm going back 30 years or more to a day in the summer holidays where I found myself alone. I'd walked my girlfriend home, and it was the time where the light starts to fade and the night starts to close in. It would have been around 8 or 9, I suppose. It was still quite light, and looking back, there was no need to be worried about, well, anything really. But as is the case with many things, the worry, it started anyway. I took a shortcut through a park which led me onto a path that cuts through some woods. The light was good enough for me to walk the path and stay on through to the other side. I've spoken about the feeling of something watching you before with others, and if you take anything from hearing this, then it's that this feeling that you get is rarely wrong. Mine, in fact, has never been wrong. So, as I walked down the path, it opened up into a small field full of long grass, yellow-colored as the sun had been quite merciless with it. When that feeling, it just struck me hard. Now, I was at an age where I thought that I could have handled pretty much anything, so I stopped and surveyed around to see what or who was there with me. That's when I heard a sharp whistle, the kind where a dog may come running. I looked around to see where it had come from, but there was no one there. I just started to walk again, thinking that the whistle must have carried from the park or whatever. Then, I caught something from the corner of my eye in the grass, a streak of white, just slow enough for me to catch it. I whirled on the spot, but there was nothing there. I shout, "Hello?" No answer. So I carry on walking. I'm getting nearer to the far edge of the field now, and that's when I heard, clear as day, literally to my back, "You're not leaving so soon?" I quickly turned again, thinking that somebody was there, but there was nothing there, and no one. Fear is a funny thing, and the realization that you could be in trouble, coupled with fear, is a horrible thing. I've always been told from being very young that nothing can hurt you that's passed on, so armed with that knowledge, I just carried on walking. I was scared, but I hunched my shoulders with my hands in my pockets and watched my feet, glancing up for the gap in the fence to get out of there. Only, it wasn't there. I don't know how, but I must have turned around one too many times, and I must have threw myself off by quite a ways from where I should have been. And now I'm a little bit more scared. I am definitely not prone to irrationality, so this was not right at all. And it was then that, on the breeze, I heard a distinct laugh, or more of a chuckle maybe. I started to jog, this time keeping my eye line on the gap in the fence, and I fell down. I say fell because it felt more like I was tripped, but maybe that was adrenaline, I'm not too sure. Whatever the case may be, my memory gets a bit hazy there because, in the dying light, I swear that I saw a man, just an outline silhouetted by the setting sun. But he was there, dog at his feet with a long walking stick, like a shepherd's crook. I sat up, and for the first time in my life I realized that my family wasn't as crazy as I thought they were. It's a humbling experience, really. And I bounced onto my feet like Jackie Chan, and that jog quickly turned into a dead sprint. I knew in my head and heart that I'd seen something that wasn't right, and I needed to get out of the way as fast as my legs would carry me. The very last thing that I heard, or thought I heard, was, "Don't be a stranger, lad." Like I said, there's places that should really be left alone, as the things there want you to come and visit. After that, even with my mates, hanging around on that park, I always felt watched. I'd look down that path and I swear that I'd hear laughter. They built some warehouses on that land eventually, so I suppose it's not somewhere to worry about these days. I still tell my boy about things like this that happened to me when I was younger, and he always rolls his eyes and sometimes laughs. And who knows, I might take him there one day and see what happens, just to see. I rescued a pit bull from a neglectful family. She was skin and bones when she came home and extremely submissive. After a week of love, affection, and food, she was the most amazing dog that I'd ever met, though. The softest, cuddliest baby who wouldn't even play fight with me unless she was under a blanket and did not know that it was me. I needed to do a quick late-night run to my local shop one night. There's a 40-minute round-trip route on main roads with houses, or a 15-minute round-trip route through an alleyway that wraps around the back of a school field. This alleyway has no street lamps, but I had never heard of anything bad happening, so I really didn't think too much of it. I set out with my dog in tow, and just before we reached the entrance, she stood still as a rock. I gently tried to usher her to follow me, but for some reason she refused. When I took my headphones off, I realized too that she was softly growling now and that I could hear a group of male voices coming from the alleyway. They soon came close enough to where I could see them, and I think there must have been around 5 or 6 of them. This was during COVID, mind you, so they were all wearing masks with their hoods up. My mum always told me that if I found myself in a situation like this, to not act scared. Being scared shows that you're an easy target. So, with that in mind, I tugged firmly on my dog's lead to get her to follow me. She stuck to my side, literally pressing her body against my leg as I walked. Yeah, it was awkward. I tried very hard to walk normally, but it was difficult. But she was quietly growling the whole time. The men had stopped and were standing slightly off the path to one side at this point. They were also talking quietly amongst themselves as we walked by. I couldn't really hear much as my heartbeat was pounding in my ears and my gut was screaming at me at this point. But once I knew that I was at a point where the darkness of the alley made me essentially invisible, I heard one of them raise their voice slightly and say, "Nah, that's a pit," in a way that sounded like he was disagreeing. Now, I admit that they could have just been discussing the breed of my dog, but the gut feeling I had while walking past and for the duration of my walk through the alley makes me believe otherwise. I do think that these men were discussing possibly robbing me or perhaps even worse, and my soft baby, who was literally scared of her own reflection, deterred them due to her being an aggressive breed. It's safe to say too that we walked a long way home after that, and I never went back there. I, a 28-year-old female, am a dog walker or pet sitter. Some of the dogs that I walk have reactivity, as did this one dog, a pit lab mix. She used to be a bad puller, along with being incredibly reactive to other dogs on leashes as soon as she'd see them. Through lots of work and training with her, she's come a long way with her reactivity to the point that it really is not an issue anymore, even when another owner's carelessness allows their dogs to get too close for comfort. Now, on this one walk, she was a dream the whole time. Past multiple dogs without issue, she would just look at me for her treat. She knew that she would get if she was good. We turned down a side street, though, that looked completely vacant at the time, so I could give her some more relaxed walking time, and all went well for a while. Not a soul in sight, until there was. Now, while I'm usually very good at keeping my head on a swivel, as some of my walks are not in the safest areas of the city, this guy definitely took me by surprise. I really don't know how he did it too, but he got about 2 to 3 feet behind us without my dog or me knowing that he was even there, and all of a sudden shouted something unintelligibly. I could really only make out the last 2 words, "your dog." Immediately though, my dog, with no prior history of human reactivity, got between us and started growling, snapping and lunging aggressively at this guy. I'm a smaller woman at 5'3", and this guy was at least 6'7", and incredibly muscular. As soon as he saw my dog trying to attack him, and me struggling to hold her back, he threw his arms up and bolted across the street without another word. He disappeared shortly after, around a corner. I have never praised a dog for reactivity like that, until that very moment. I gave her all the treats that I had left in my pocket, took her home and told her owner what had just happened and how her dog might have just saved my life. Of course, I hope that I'm wrong and the guy was just slow with social cues, but either the dog or I got that impression. Needless to say, she is by far my favorite client dog. I go on walks with her still every week, but we haven't gone down the street again while there are no people about. I am beyond blessed to have her and get to walk her weekly, but I do hope that I never see that guy again. This happened 7 years ago when I was just a little bit more naive and 30 pounds lighter. Still just as short though. It was a week before Christmas and I was finishing up shopping or something. My mother, aunt, and nana are all big into lottery, so I tend to get some scratch tickets and season tickets as gifts. I don't gamble really, so it's my one time buying them in a year. I always go to the same place too, down the street from me, and I wouldn't say that I live anywhere dangerous by any means. Not gated community level, but like a solid children can walk around alone in the dusk out of 10 sort of thing. Now, I had an old SAAB that was the classic, no one can drive her but me level of finicky. Sometimes she just wouldn't start unless you held the brake and sort of shifted through the gears a bit, went to park, pushed really hard, and then turned the key. It took forever to figure that special secret handshake out, by the way. The roof needed to be manually put up, like it fell on your head sometimes, if you put it down. Not a design feature. And just a lot of sort of wonky stuff, I guess. My brother, who is a lunatic with toxic rage issues, but that's a whole different story, had broken the handle on my passenger side door right before this, after picking him up from scaring children at the hospital. So you couldn't open that door at all anymore. To get to the passenger side, you were either Dukes of Hazzarding it, or you'd have to go through my side. So it's Christmassy, a bit of snow and sludge, but pretty normal day. I go to the gas station to get the tickets, cash only, so enough money to make my purchases in hand. There are a few people behind me in line and a few playing Keno in the sitting area. There's also one wiry guy behind me to the side in line, but I didn't notice much other than that he was a little closer than I would personally have liked. In any case, I make my purchases, several $20 scratch tickets. They don't want anything less, bad odds apparently. Anyway, a couple of year-long season tickets and everything adds up to just over $400. Ouch. I pay the cashier and I head out to my janky little SAAB. I sit down, close my door, don't lock it, and begin to count or sort of organize my change and everything. When not even 35 seconds later, the wiry man comes out, walks to my car, and as he does, he stalls just for a second and tries my passenger side handle. It doesn't work and just makes a clunk as the handle is sort of free-moving and doesn't connect to any mechanical stuff at this point. But my heart dropped and my stomach got really sour. My body knew to panic, but my head hadn't caught up yet. He immediately keeps going, walking out of the parking lot and down the sidewalk. And it wasn't until I thought about it later and told some people that I really didn't even consider that the man was probably going to try and rob me, or maybe even worse. I now very religiously follow the 45-second rule, and I am a lot more vigilant during Christmas shopping. I've had several paranormal experiences in my lifetime, both personally and professionally, but I'm going to discuss the professional paranormal experiences at this point. Now, I was a surgical technologist in labor and delivery for about 10 years. I worked for a non-for-profit Catholic hospital for almost 4 years out of that 10. When I first started in the department, the two techs that had already worked there for a very long time, their names are M and J, and myself K, told me stories about Sister Mary Margaret, who apparently was a surgery tech back when the hospital was still run by nuns. Needless to say, Sister Mary Margaret was very much by the book and left little room for her co-workers' errors. Jay knew about Sister Mary Margaret, but Em had worked there for so long that she actually worked with the nun. and began to tell tales about instances when she'd heard Sister Mary Margaret in the OR suite long after she'd passed away, and up to the current time frame. Being a born skeptic, I thought Em and Jay were just hazing the new girl. I wasn't buying a bit of their nonsense. Well, fast forward to when I'm off of orientation and working my 12-hour night shifts. I'd been in the back setting up the OR suite or stocking supplies, and I could hear the shuffle of shoe covers, just as high heels make that sort of clack-clack sound. There is a very distinct sound that shoe covers make when they shuffle along the hospital floor like that. I just sleuthed it out of there though, and I figured that M and or Jay put one of the night shift nurses up to pranking me just to see if I'd fall for it. And well, I just had to hop out of there, catch them in the act, and let them know that they weren't fooling anybody. So I popped out into the hallway, ready to scare the scrub pants off of whoever was pranking me, but when I jumped out into the hallway, nobody was there. There was no movement in the hallway, swinging of the doors, chatter on the intercoms, nothing. I was really perplexed by that initially. But being the first incident, I just kind of shrugged it off and I just went on working. As time passed though, these incidents became more and more frequent. We had more new employees and Em and Jay were training them. Me and her new orientee had an incident where sterile supplies were on the OR bed and a bulb syringe floated from the top of the supply pile at a 90-degree angle for about a minute and then just dropped to the floor. I really began believing them too when they relayed that story to me during report. I could tell that they were both honestly shaken up by the ordeal, and I actually felt pretty bad for them. They were scared, and trust me, these two were not actresses by any means. There was no way that they could have given such an Oscar-worthy performance like that. In any case, I continued having my own encounters with shuffling shoe covers, unintelligible whispering, all of the hallmarks of a typical haunting. Some of my tech co-workers continued reporting the same kind of activity. None of the activity was as egregious as what Em and her orientee experienced with the floating bulb syringe in midair. But then it all stopped being amusing to me when I went to the OR suite at about 2:30 or 3 in the morning to stock linens and sterile water and saline into the warmer. I'd done this 100 times before. It wasn't anything new by any means. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with hospital warmers, they are the equivalent to leaving the hospital and going straight to Narnia. These miraculous inventions are what makes your hospital blankets so nice and toasty. But we also put sterile water and saline in the top portion of the warmer to heat up liquids used externally so the patient doesn't get hypothermic. To give you a visual, it literally looks like an industrial-sized stainless steel refrigerator, I guess. It performs in the same way, except instead of making everything cold, it warms everything up, thus the hospital warmer. So I had taken the linen cart and some water and saline bottles with me to stock up everything. I left the cart in the hallway outside of our 2 surgical suites. The warmer was in between both OR suites and a little cubby besides our crash cart. And as you probably very well know, hospitals are known for migraine-inducing bright lights. This was one of a few things that I disliked about working in a hospital, in fact. Whenever I was able, I'd spare the blinding fluorescent lights as much as possible. So I proceeded to stock the warmer without turning lights on to spare myself the glare whenever I could. The OR suites were darkened and shadowy, but I could easily see to get around. I'm sure everybody familiar with refrigerators or freezers already is aware that the refrigerator part is pretty cold and the freezer part is obviously frozen cold. Well, the warmers at the hospital basically work on the same premise. The refrigerator part warms the blankets, while the freezer part makes the external water and saline bottles really toasty. That's exactly what we want there too. So I open the refrigerator part and expect to be hit in the face with some pretty arid heat, but it was cold. Was it broken? Ugh, it has to be. There's no way that this warmer could be this cold. Something obviously isn't right. Then I also checked the freezer portion, which should have been even hotter, but it was actually colder. That wasn't right. It was not normal for this warmer to be this cold. The fans were blowing warm air, but it just wasn't warming anything up. And all of a sudden, it was then that I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I have never felt that way at the job previously or ever since. So I turned around and looked up to see what I can only describe as a black mist or smoke towards the top of the ceiling. At first, I thought that maybe some part of the warmer's electric had fizzled out and this was the beginning of a fire. The problem was, the black mist or smoke was on the ceiling and in the opposite corner of the room. I looked at the warmer's connections and everything was as it was supposed to be. There was nothing wrong with the warmer, it seemed. But there was something in that OR suite cubby that was not friendly, and it seemed rather malevolent. I knew then and there that this wasn't what the other girls described. This wasn't Sister Mary Margaret. She would never do anything menacing like this. Well, at least not based on the stories that I had heard. I can't explain how, but I knew not only that it wasn't her, but I also knew that she wasn't there to help protect me from whatever the heck this was. I watched as it slowly began to seep down from the corner of the ceiling towards myself and the warmer. I did what seemed to be the most sensible thing, and I just began reciting the Lord's Prayer. And it paused, full stop. As I continued, it literally looked like a film being played in reverse. It slinked back to the corner that it came from, and as soon as it did, it was just gone. Like, it just disappeared before my eyes. I turned to hustle out of that little cubby area and back into the hallway. I happened to notice, when I turned around to face the warmer, that it was back to its normally toasty temperature as well. I didn't ruminate on it too long. I just booked it out of the OR suite to the hallway and I went back to the nurse's station. Now, I, until this very story, never said a thing to anyone about anything like this. I didn't mention my experience to coworkers, friends, or family. I honestly just didn't want to be ridiculed. But I just feel that this story, I'm no longer compelled to keep it to myself. There's really no harm in sharing it now, and I just really feel like getting it off my chest because the whole thing, I just feel really scared.